The back of a police cruiser has a distinct smell. It smells of stale sweat, industrial cleaner, and the lingering fear of the hundreds of men who sat there before you. I sat with my hands resting on my knees, staring out the window as the manicured lawns of the North Shore blurred past. The two officers in the front seat did not speak to me. They were young white and clearly annoyed that their quiet patrol had been interrupted by a domestic dispute involving an old black man. They did not arrest me. They did not read me my rights. They simply drove me to the edge of the subdivision like they were taking out the trash. The car slowed to a stop near the bus depot, miles away from the warmth of the house I had paid for. The officer in the passenger seat rolled down his window but did not look at me. He looked at the dashboard. "We do not want to see you back there tonight, Mr. King," he said, his voice flat. "The homeowners have made it clear you are trespassing. If we get another call, we will have to book you. Do you understand?" I understood perfectly. I understood that in their eyes I was not a father who had been wronged. I was a disturbance. I was a problem to be removed so the wealthy residents could sleep soundly. I stepped out of the car. The wind hit me harder here, away from the shelter of the large oak trees that lined my son's street. The cruiser did not wait. It pulled a U-turn and sped back toward the warmth, leaving me standing under a flickering street lamp. I checked my pockets. I had my phone, my wallet, and the spare key to my old truck. Thank God for small mercies. Tiffany hated my 1998 Ford F-150. She called it an eyesore and refused to let me park it in the heated garage. She made me park it 2 blocks away in a public lot behind the community center so her friends would not see it when they came over for brunch. I walked. It was a 20-minute walk in 10-degree weather. My left leg dragged slightly. The cold has a way of finding old injuries, seeking them out like a heat-seeking missile. By the time I reached the truck, my knee felt like it was being crushed in a vise. The truck was covered in a layer of ice. I chipped away at the door handle with my credit card until I could pry it open. The engine groaned. It coughed, sputtered, and finally roared to life, shaking the entire frame. I let it run for a minute, grateful for the smell of gasoline and old upholstery. It was the smell of honest work. I drove to the Starlight Motel on the outskirts of the city. It was the kind of place where the neon sign buzzed loudly and the letters M and O were burnt out. I did not care. I just needed a bed and a heater. I walked into the lobby. The man behind the bulletproof glass did not look up from his small television. "One night," I said. $45, he grunted. I pulled out my credit card. It was a platinum card. I had excellent credit. I had spent 40 years building that credit score, never missing a payment, never overextending myself. I slid the card under the glass. The clerk swiped it. He frowned. Swiped it again. Then he looked at me with a sneer. Declined. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Try it again," I said. "That is impossible." "It is declined, old man," he said, tossing the card back at me. "Insufficient funds or reported stolen. Either way, get out unless you have cash." I stared at the piece of plastic in my hand. Then I remembered. Last year when I had my hip surgery, Tiffany suggested I add Damon to the account. "Just in case something happens to you, Dad," she had said. "We need to be able to pay your medical bills if you are in a coma." I had agreed. I thought it was prudent. I thought it was love. It was a trap. They had not just kicked me out. They had cut off my oxygen. They had logged in likely minutes after I walked out the door and reported the card lost or simply drained the limit. They wanted me destitute. They wanted me to freeze. I checked my wallet. I had $12 in cash. Not enough for a room. Not enough for anything but a gallon of gas and a cheap sandwich. I walked back to the truck. The wind was merciless now. It cut through my wool coat like it was made of paper. I climbed into the cab and locked the doors. I reclined the seat as far as it would go, which was not much. I wrapped my coat tighter around myself and pulled an old grease-stained blanket from behind the seat. It smelled of motor oil, but it was another layer. I could not keep the engine running all night. I did not have enough gas, and with my cards blocked, I could not buy more. I ran the heater for 10 minutes until the cab was bearable, then I turned the key off. The silence that followed was heavy. The darkness of the parking lot pressed in against the windows. And then the pain came. It started in my ankle and shot up to my hip. A throbbing, grinding ache that made me grit my teeth. I rubbed my thigh, feeling the scar tissue through my trousers. People assume when they see a black man of my generation with a limp that I served in Vietnam. They ask me which battalion I was in. They ask me about the jungle. But I did not get this limp from a Viet Cong bullet. I got it from a scaffold in downtown Chicago in the winter of 1990. Damon was 10 years old. He had been accepted into a private preparatory school. It was a prestigious school, the kind that opened doors to the Ivy League. But the tuition was more than my annual salary. Sarah was already sick then, unable to work. I did not want my son to go to the public school in our neighborhood. I saw what happened to the boys there. The gangs, the drugs, the hopelessness. I wanted out for him. So I took double shifts. I worked days at the steel mill and nights on a construction crew building a new high-rise. I slept 3 hours a night. I drank coffee until my hands shook. That night in 1990 was brutal. An ice storm had coated the city in glaze. The foreman told us to stop, but I needed the overtime. I needed the holiday bonus to pay for Damon's spring semester. I went up to secure a tarp on the 4th floor. One misstep, one patch of black ice. I fell 20 feet. I landed on a pile of rebar. I remembered the sound of my leg snapping. It sounded like a gunshot. I remembered lying in the freezing mud looking up at the gray sky, unable to breathe. The doctors said I would never walk without a cane again. They said I should apply for disability. I was back at work in 6 weeks. I limped. I swallowed painkillers by the handful. But I worked. Because every time I paid that tuition bill, I told myself it was worth it. I was buying my son a future. I was buying him a ticket to a world where he would never have to work on a scaffold in an ice storm. I looked at my hands now gripping the steering wheel of a frozen truck. My knuckles were swollen. My fingernails were thick and yellowed. I had succeeded. I had bought him that future. Damon went to the prep school. He went to college. He met Tiffany. He became a man who wore soft suits and had soft hands. And his thanks was to leave me here, to freeze in a parking lot while he slept in the master bedroom I paid for. The physical pain in my leg was agonizing, but it was nothing compared to the shame burning in my chest. I had raised a coward. I had sacrificed my body to build a man who would stand by and watch his wife throw his father to the wolves. I closed my eyes, but I did not sleep. The cold was seeping in through the floorboards. My breath came out in white puffs. I thought about the envelope Damon had handed me, the eviction notice. I thought about the smirk on Tiffany's face. They thought this was the end. They thought I was just a sad old man shivering in a truck defeated by the winter and their cruelty. But as the pain in my leg throbbed in time with my heartbeat, a new feeling began to rise. It was not despair. It was not sadness. It was rage. Cold, hard, calculated rage. I reached for my phone again. The battery was low, but I had one call to make. I did not call the police. I did not call a charity. I scrolled through my contacts until I found a number I had not dialed in years. Saul Berkowitz. Saul was the only lawyer in Chicago who was more stubborn than I was. We had fought on opposite sides of the table in the 80s, and we had become friends over whiskey and war stories. I pressed call. It rang 4 times. Hello. Saul's voice was raspy, heavy with sleep. Thaddeus. It is 2 a.m. Is everything all right? I looked out at the desolate parking lot. No, Saul. I said, my voice steady, despite the shivering. Nothing is all right. But tomorrow we are going to work. Work? Saul asked, confused. You retired 10 years ago. I am coming out of retirement, I said. I have one last negotiation to handle, and this time I am not settling for a compromise. I hung up the phone. I pulled the grease-stained blanket up to my chin. I watched the frost form patterns on the windshield. Let them sleep in their warm bed tonight. Let them dream of their millions. Because when the sun comes up, I am coming for everything. And I know exactly where the bodies are buried. The sun came up over Chicago like a bruised eye. It was a pale, watery light that offered no warmth, only visibility. I woke up with a gasp, my breath clouding the freezing air inside the cab of the Ford. My neck was stiff, locked in a painful spasm, and my bad leg felt like it was encased in concrete. I tried to move my fingers, and they were slow, clumsy, responding to my brain with a lag that terrified me. I checked the dashboard clock. It was 7 a.m. I had survived the night, but survival has a price. My chest felt tight, a squeezing sensation that I knew all too well. It was not just the stress, it was my blood pressure. I had left my medication on the kitchen counter in the chaos of the eviction. Lisinopril. Without it, my heart was a ticking time bomb. I had to go back, not to beg, not to fight, just to survive. I drove the truck out of the motel parking lot, the tires crunching on the black ice. The heater rattled, blowing lukewarm air that smelled of dust. I drove slowly, preserving what little gas I had left. As I approached the wealthy subdivision where my son lived, where I had lived until 12 hours ago, I felt a knot of nausea in my stomach. It was the sickness of knowing you are walking into enemy territory, except the enemy sleeps in the bed you paid for. I did not pull into the driveway. I parked 3 houses down behind a large landscaping van. I turned off the engine and watched. There was activity at the house. A large dump truck was parked right on the lawn, its wheels tearing up the grass I had spent 2 summers restoring. Men in orange jumpsuits were hauling things out of the front door. They were moving fast, throwing items with the careless indifference of people who are paid by the hour to destroy. I squinted, trying to make out what they were carrying. Then I saw it. A flash of brown leather. My armchair. The chair I had sat in every evening for 10 years. The chair where I read stories to Damon's children before they moved away to boarding school. The chair where I sat and held Sarah's hand in her final weeks when she was too weak to move from the living room. One of the workers hoisted it onto his shoulder and tossed it into the open back of the truck. It landed with a sickening crunch, the wood frame splintering. My grip on the steering wheel tightened until my knuckles turned gray. Next came the boxes. I knew those boxes. They were labeled in my handwriting. Jazz, labor history, photos. A worker dumped a box of vinyl records over the side. I watched as the black discs spilled out, glistening in the winter sun. I saw the cover of Kind of Blue by Miles Davis slide out and snap in half as it hit the metal bed of the truck. That record was a first pressing. I had bought it with my first paycheck at the steel mill in 1974. It survived 4 moves, a flooded basement, and 50 years of life. It did not survive Tiffany King. I opened the truck door. I could not just watch. I needed to get closer. I needed my medicine, but seeing my life being treated like garbage pulled me forward like a magnet. I walked down the sidewalk, my cane tapping a rhythmic code of anger on the pavement. I stayed on the opposite side of the street, partially hidden by the oak trees. Then the front door opened again. Tiffany stepped out. She was wearing a white cashmere coat and oversized sunglasses, looking like a movie star on a set. She held a steaming cup of coffee in one hand and her smartphone in the other. She was not helping. She was directing. Faster, she yelled at the men. I want this junk gone before the interior designers get here at noon. I want the energy of this place cleared out. She held her phone up, the camera lens pointed at the destruction. She was live streaming. I could tell by the way she posed, tilting her head, putting on that fake bright smile that she reserved for her digital audience. "Hey guys," she chirped, her voice carrying over the cold air. "Happy Tuesday. We are doing a massive decluttering today. Out with the old musty energy and in with the new. We are making space for the new chapter, the millionaire chapter. Look at all this old junk. Can you believe we lived with this clutter?" She panned the camera toward the dump truck, showing the broken chair, the shattered records. "It is so freeing to let go of the past," she said to her followers. "Sometimes you just have to cut the dead weight to fly right dead weight." That is what I was to her. That is what my 40 years of labor were. Dead weight. I stepped out from behind the tree. I did not mean to, but my legs moved on their own. Tiffany saw me. She did not look scared. She did not look ashamed. She looked delighted. A villain always loves an audience. She lowered the phone slightly but kept it recording. She wanted a reaction. She wanted the angry black man to scream so she could play the victim. "Well, look who it is," she called out. "Come to pick through the trash, Thaddeus. You are welcome to take whatever the garbage men leave behind." I stood my ground. My voice was low, rough, like gravel. "I came for my medicine, Tiffany. It is on the counter. And I want my wife's photo albums. You have no right to throw those away." She laughed. It was a light tinkling sound that made my skin crawl. "Rights. You lost your rights when you signed that paper, sweetheart. Everything in the house is mine, and honestly, those old albums smell like mildew. They are a health hazard." She turned to a worker who was carrying a small, heavy ceramic jar. It was blue with gold trim. My heart stopped. It was Sarah's urn. We had scattered most of her ashes in Lake Michigan as she wanted. But I had kept a small portion, just a little bit, to talk to when the nights got too long, to say good morning to. It sat on the mantel, the center of my world. "Wait," I said. The word came out as a plea, stripped of all pride. "Tiffany, please." "Not that." Tiffany looked at the urn. Then she looked at me. A cruel spark lit up her eyes behind the sunglasses. She saw the desperation on my face. She knew she had found the button to push. "Oh, this?" she asked, tapping a long fingernail against the ceramic. "It does not go with the new decor. We are going for a minimalist, modern beige aesthetic. This blue is just tacky." She walked over to the green plastic bin at the curb, the bin for organic waste, grass clippings, apple cores, dog waste. "Tiffany, do not do it," I warned. My voice dropped an octave. It was the voice I used when a strike was about to turn violent. She smiled at the camera phone. "Fertilizer for the future," she announced. And she dropped the urn. I watched it fall in slow motion. I heard the dull thud as it hit the bottom of the plastic bin. It did not break, thank God, but it was in the trash. My wife, my Sarah, in the trash. The worker standing next to her looked away embarrassed. Even he, a stranger paid minimum wage, knew that a line had been crossed. Tiffany dusted her hands off as if she had just touched something filthy. "There," she said. "Now the house is clean." Something inside me snapped. But it was not a snap of violence. It was the snap of a lock falling into place. The last remnant of hesitation, the last drop of mercy I held for my son's wife, evaporated. I did not scream. I did not rush at her. I walked forward, slow, deliberate. The cane hit the pavement. Click, click, click. Tiffany took a half step back, her smile faltering for a second. She expected rage. She expected a show for her live stream. She did not expect silence. I walked past her. I did not even look at her face. I looked through her as if she were a ghost. I reached into the green bin. My hands, scarred and trembling slightly, lifted the blue urn gently. I wiped a smudge of dirt from the gold rim with the sleeve of my coat. I held it close to my chest, tucking it inside my wool jacket against my heart. Then I turned to face her. Tiffany was holding the phone up, but her hand was wavering. The comments on her screen must have been scrolling fast. "Even strangers know evil when they see it." "You are pathetic," she spat out, trying to regain control. "Taking trash out of a dumpster? Is this what your life has come to?" I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the fear behind the arrogance. I saw the emptiness behind the luxury. I touched the brim of my cap. "Enjoy the house, Tiffany," I said. My voice was steady, calm, terrifyingly flat. "Make sure you get the expensive heaters. It is going to get very cold for you soon." I turned around and walked away. I did not look back at the shattered records. I did not look back at the broken chair. I had what mattered. I had Sarah. And I had a plan. I walked back to my truck, the urn warm against my ribs. I sat in the driver's seat and placed Sarah gently on the passenger seat, wrapping her in the grease-stained blanket. "I am sorry, baby," I whispered to the urn. "I am sorry you had to see that. But do not worry. I am about to teach her a lesson she will never forget." I pulled out my phone. My thumb hovered over the contacts. I scrolled past Damon. I scrolled past the Union Hall. I stopped at a name. Saul Berkowitz. I pressed dial. It rang once. Twice. Thaddeus Saul's voice answered. "I am looking at the file right now. It is worse than we thought. But there is an opening." I watched Tiffany in the rearview mirror. She was yelling at the workers again, waving her arms. "Saul," I said, staring at her reflection. "Do you remember the negotiation in 2010? The one with the steel mill merger?" There was a pause on the other end. I remember Saul said, "You saved my firm from bankruptcy. You found that hidden clause in the pension fund. I told you then I owe you a life debt. I am calling it in, Saul," I said. "Anything, Thaddeus, name it. I want you to find the trustee of the Richard Henderson estate," I said. "I want you to set up a meeting. Today." Thaddeus Saul hesitated. "The trustee is anonymous. It is a blind trust. Even the family does not know who it is. Richard set it up that way to protect the assets from people like his daughter." "I know," I said. My eyes narrowed as I watched Tiffany kick a pile of my books. "But I have a feeling I know who it is. Richard was a man of patterns, and he trusted very few people." "Thaddeus, what are you planning?" I started the engine of the truck. The roar was loud, drowning out the sound of Tiffany shouting in the distance. "I am not planning a negotiation, Saul," I said. "I am planning an eviction." I put the truck in gear. "Meet me at the diner on 4th Street in an hour," I said. "And Saul, bring the full unredacted will, the one with the footnotes." I hung up. I reached over and patted the urn. "Let's go to work, Sarah." I drove away, leaving the wreckage of my past on the lawn. Tiffany thought she had thrown away my life. She did not realize she had just freed me to burn hers to the ground. The diner on 4th Street smelled of burnt coffee and frying bacon, a scent that felt like a warm blanket after a night spent shivering in my truck. I sat in the corner booth nursing a cup of black coffee that I could not afford to refill. My hands were still stiff from the cold, but my mind was sharp. Across from me sat Saul Berkowitz. At 75, Saul looked like a bulldog in a cheap suit. He had deep bags under his eyes and a permanent scowl etched into his face, but his eyes were the brightest things in the room. He pushed a plate of eggs and toast toward me. "Eat, Thaddeus," he grunted. "You look like hell, and I am not billing you for the breakfast, so do not even start with your pride." I picked up the fork. My hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but from hunger. I had not eaten since the can of beans the night before. "Thank you, Saul." Saul waved his hand dismissively and pulled a thick file folder out of his battered briefcase. He slammed it onto the Formica table. The sound made a waitress jump, but Saul did not notice. He was already in lawyer mode. "All right, let us talk about Richard Henderson," he said, opening the file. "Your daughter-in-law's father, real estate tycoon, ruthless businessman, and according to these documents, a man who died with $50 million in liquid assets and property." I chewed the toast slowly, feeling the warmth spread through my chest. I knew Richard. We sat on opposite sides of the negotiation table in '89. He was a hard man. He would fire a worker for being 5 minutes late, but he would also pay for that worker's surgery if he got hurt on the job. He had a code. Saul nodded. Exactly. A code. Which is why this preliminary will does not make any sense. He slid a paper across the table. It was a copy of the document Tiffany had been waving around. The preliminary notice of inheritance. It stated that Tiffany King was the sole beneficiary of the Henderson estate. I read it carefully. It looked standard. It looked legal. Saul tapped the paper with a thick finger. "That is what the probate court sent out initially. It is based on a will filed 10 years ago. But Richard was not a man who let things sit for 10 years. He updated his contracts every 6 months. Why would he leave his fortune to a daughter he could barely stand?" I looked up at Saul. He hated her. "Hated is a strong word," Saul said, leaning in. But he was disappointed. He told me once at a charity dinner that Tiffany was the biggest mistake of his life. He called her a bottomless pit of need. He said she had the appetite of a shark but the work ethic of a sloth. He cut her allowance 3 times. He refused to pay for her second wedding. I nodded. That sounded like the Richard I knew. He respected grit. He respected people who built things. Tiffany had never built anything in her life except debt. "So why leave her $50 million?" I asked. Saul smiled, a slow, predatory smile that revealed a gold tooth. "That is the question, isn't it? And while we are asking questions, let us look at what your lovely daughter-in-law is doing with the answer she thinks she has." Saul pulled out another stack of papers. These were not legal documents. They were credit reports and bank notifications. "I have a friend at the dealership on Magnificent Mile," Saul said. "Guess who walked in there at 9 a.m. this morning?" I sighed. "Tiffany. She did not just walk in." Saul chuckled. "She pre-ordered a customized Bentley, $200,000. She put down a $10,000 deposit using a credit card that is already maxed out, but the dealership let it slide because she showed them this preliminary notice." I shook my head. She is spending the money before the probate judge even bangs the gavel. "It gets better," Saul continued. "She called a yacht broker in Miami. She wants to charter a boat for a celebration cruise next month. She is leveraging the inheritance. She is taking out bridge loans. She is borrowing against a fortune she has not actually touched yet. She is digging a hole," I said quietly. "She is digging a canyon, Thaddeus. If for any reason that money does not come through, she will be bankrupt within a week. She will go to prison for fraud." I looked out the window of the diner. Snow was starting to fall again. Somewhere in that cold city, Tiffany was probably popping champagne, toasting to her genius, while my son sat in the corner silent and complicit. "But the money is coming through, isn't it?" I asked. "The will says she is the beneficiary." Saul closed the folder and leaned back. "That is what I thought too, until I dug a little deeper. You see, Richard Henderson had a lawyer before he died, a man named Arthur Miller, very old school, very discreet. Arthur retired last week, the day after Richard died. Convenient, right?" I frowned. "What are you getting at, Saul?" "I called Arthur this morning," Saul said. "He would not talk to me. client privilege and all that, but he did tell me to check the county clerk's office for a codicil filed 48 hours before Richard's death. A codicil. An amendment to the will. I went down there myself before I came here, Saul said. He pulled out a single sheet of paper from his inside jacket pocket. He handled it like it was a loaded gun. This is the real will, Thaddeus, the one that supersedes the 10-year-old document Tiffany is waving around. I took the paper. My eyes scanned the legal jargon. Whereases and therefores. Read Clause 4, be Saul instructed. The trust. I read it aloud, my voice low. The entirety of the estate shall be placed into a spendthrift trust for the benefit of Tiffany King. However, the beneficiary shall have no direct access to the principal or the income. I stopped. No access. Keep reading, Saul said, his eyes gleaming. I continued. The distribution of funds shall be at the sole and absolute discretion of the trustee. The trustee shall have the power to withhold all payments if the beneficiary fails to meet the moral and ethical standards set forth in Appendix A. I looked up. Moral and ethical standards. Richard knew her, Saul said. He knew if he gave her $50 million, she would blow it in a year or snort it up her nose. He wanted to protect the money from her. He wanted to force her to grow up. But who is the trustee, I asked. Usually it is a bank, a corporate fiduciary. They just sign checks. They do not care about morals. Saul shook his head. That is the twist, my friend. Clause 5C. The trustee shall not be a financial institution. The trustee shall be an individual appointed by me, a person of unimpeachable character and iron will. I looked at the bottom of the page. The name of the trustee was redacted. Blacked out. Why is the name hidden, I asked. Because Richard knew Tiffany would try to bribe or threaten them, Saul explained. The identity of the trustee is sealed until the formal reading of the will. Until then, it is a ghost. I sat back, the implications washing over me. Tiffany was out there buying Bentleys and renting yachts thinking she had won the lottery. But in reality, she had just walked into a cage. A cage where someone else held the key. And if she fails these moral standards, I asked. Then the money goes to charity, Saul said. Every cent. And Tiffany gets nothing but her debts. I looked at the date on the codicil. It was signed 2 days before Richard died. 2 days ago. Richard was dying of cancer, I said. He knew the end was coming. He spent his last hours setting this trap. He did not set a trap. Thaddeus, Saul corrected me. He set a test, a final test for his daughter. If she is a good person, she gets the money. If she is the monster he suspected she was, well, then justice is served. I thought about the urn in the trash. I thought about the eviction notice. I thought about my son's silence. She has already failed, I said. She failed before the ink was dry. Saul nodded. We know that. But the trustee does not know that yet. Whoever this person is, they need evidence. They need proof. I looked at the redacted name again. The black bar covered a name that was short. Maybe 6 or 7 letters. Saul, I said slowly. You said Richard respected grit. You said he respected people who stood up to him. Saul watched me carefully. Where are you going with this, Thaddeus? I remembered a night in 1989. The strike had gone on for 3 weeks. Violence was in the air. Richard Henderson had asked to meet me alone in a warehouse down by the docks. Everyone told me it was a trap. They said he would have me beaten. I went anyway. Just me and my cane. We talked for 4 hours. We yelled, we argued, but at the end of the night we shook hands. He gave the workers a 10% raise, and I promised no more strikes for 5 years. As I was leaving, he looked at me and said, Thaddeus, you are the only man in this city who cannot be bought. I hate you for it, but I respect it. I looked at Saul. The realization hit me like a physical blow. The timing, the specific wording, unimpeachable character, iron will. Saul, I whispered, do you have the unredacted copy? Saul hesitated. I am not supposed to show you this, Thaddeus. It could get me disbarred. Show me, I said. Saul looked around the diner to make sure no one was watching. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small folded piece of paper. He unfolded it and placed it over the blacked-out section of the will. I looked down. The name was not redacted on this copy. It was printed in bold black letters. Trustee Thaddeus King. The world seemed to stop. The noise of the diner faded away. I stared at my own name. Richard Henderson, the man I had fought, the man who represented everything I stood against, had left me in charge of his empire. He had handed me the power to judge his daughter. He knew, I whispered. He knew she would come for me. He knew she would try to destroy me. He gave you a weapon, Saul said quietly. He gave you the ultimate weapon, but he also gave you a burden. You have to decide, Thaddeus. Do you use this to get revenge, or do you use it to do what is right? I closed my eyes. I saw Tiffany's face as she dropped Sarah's urn. I saw the smirk as she told me to get out. Revenge. No. Revenge is emotional. Revenge is messy. This was not going to be revenge. This was going to be an education. I opened my eyes. I folded the paper and put it in my pocket. Saul, I said, my voice steady and cold. When is the formal reading of the will? Tomorrow at noon, Saul said. At my office. Tiffany will be there. Her lawyer will be there. Good, I said. I picked up the check for the breakfast, ignoring Saul's protest. I pulled out my last $10 bill and placed it on the table. I stood up. I buttoned my old wool coat. Thaddeus, Saul asked, looking worried, "What are you going to do?" "I am going to get a haircut," I said. "And then I am going to prepare for a meeting." I walked out of the diner into the snow. The wind was still biting, but I did not feel it anymore. I felt powerful. I felt dangerous. Tiffany King was driving around in a stolen future, spending money that belonged to a ghost. She thought I was a homeless old man she had discarded. She had no idea that tomorrow she would be walking into a room to beg for her life from the very man she tried to destroy. The game had changed, and this time, I was the one dealing the cards. The knock on the door of room 12 was hesitant. It was not the aggressive pounding of a landlord looking for rent, nor was it the heavy fist of the police. It was a soft, rhythmic tapping, like someone was hoping I would not hear it. But I was awake. I was sitting on the edge of the sagging mattress, polishing my shoes. A man can lose his home, he can lose his fortune, but he should never lose his dignity. And dignity starts with clean shoes. I walked to the door, my cane thumping against the thin, stained carpet. I pulled back the curtain slightly. It was Damon. My heart gave a foolish, involuntary leap. For a split second, I was not Thaddeus King, the discarded father. I was just a dad. I thought maybe he escaped. Maybe he woke up this morning, saw the monster sleeping next to him, and packed a bag. Maybe he is here to take me to breakfast. Maybe he is here to say he is sorry. I undid the chain lock and opened the door. The cold air rushed in, bringing with it the smell of exhaust and expensive cologne. Damon was standing there in a cashmere coat that probably cost more than this entire motel. He looked out of place against the peeling paint and the flickering neon lights. He looked like a prince visiting the slums. He did not look me in the eye. He looked at my shoulder. "Can I come in, Dad?" he asked. His voice was tight. I stepped aside. He walked in and immediately wrinkled his nose. The room smelled of bleach and old cigarettes, a smell that soap could not scrub away. He did not sit down. There was only one chair, and it was covered in a suspicious stain. He stood in the middle of the room, keeping his hands in his pockets. I closed the door and leaned against it, crossing my arms. I waited. I wanted him to speak first. I wanted him to bridge the gap he had created. "It is cold in here," he said. "It is cheaper that way," I replied. Damon shifted his weight. He looked at the radiator, then at the floor. "Look, Dad, about yesterday," he started. "It was intense. Tiffany gets overwhelmed. You know how she is. She has a lot on her plate right now with the inheritance and the press." I said nothing. I just watched him. I watched the boy I had taught to ride a bike. The boy I had held when he cried over a broken arm. The boy who is now a 35-year-old man making excuses for a woman who threw his mother's ashes in the trash. "I saw you this morning," he said quietly. "The workers told me. They said you came by and took Mom's urn." I tapped my cane on the floor. "Yes, I took my wife out of the garbage can, Damon. Where you left her." He winced. "I did not leave her there, Dad. I was inside. I did not know Tiffany was going to do that. She is trying to declutter. She says we need to make space for the new energy." I felt a surge of bile in my throat. Space for new energy. That is what they called erasing a life. "Why are you here, Damon?" I asked. I did not have the energy for small talk. I had a meeting with a lawyer in 2 hours and I needed to save my strength. Damon took a deep breath. He finally looked at me. His eyes were red-rimmed with dark circles. He looked terrified. "I need a favor, Dad." "A favor." The word hung in the air like a bad joke. He had kicked me out into a blizzard, and now he needed a favor. He reached into his coat pocket. For a second, I thought he might pull out a wad of cash. I thought maybe he was going to try and give me money for a hotel. Instead, he pulled out a folded document. "I need you to sign this," he said, holding it out. I did not take it. "What is it?" "It is Mom's life insurance policy," he said. "The one from the union, the one you kept paying on even after she died, the survivor benefit rider." I frowned. That policy was small, maybe $50,000. It was meant to cover my funeral expenses when my time came. It was meant to leave something for the grandchildren I hoped to have one day. "Why do you need that?" I asked. "Tiffany just inherited $50 million. You are rich, remember. You are buying Bentleys." Damon's face crumbled. He stepped closer, lowering his voice to a whisper. "The money is not here yet, Dad. Probate takes time. The lawyers say it could be weeks, maybe months before we see actual cash. And Tiffany, she is spending like we have it in the bank today." "So tell her to stop," I said. "I cannot," he hissed. "She is on a high. If I tell her to stop, she thinks I am not supporting her vision. She thinks I am being negative." He looked over his shoulder at the door as if he expected Tiffany to burst in. "But that is not the problem, Dad. The problem is, I have debts." I stared at him. "Debts. Gambling debts." He admitted, his voice shaking. "Online poker. Sports betting. I thought I could win it back. I thought I could fix it before Tiffany found out. But I am down, Dad. I am down $40,000. And the people I owe, they are not banks. They are calling me. They know where we live." He shoved the paper toward me again. "If you sign this, I can cash out the policy today. I can pay them off. Then when Tiffany's money comes in, I will pay you back. I swear. I just need this bridge, Dad. Please. If Tiffany finds out I have debt, she will leave me. She will cut me out of the will. I will lose everything." I looked at the paper. I looked at my son. He was not here to apologize. He was not here to check on me. He was here because he was trapped. He was a rat in a maze of his own making, and he wanted to use his mother's death benefit to buy his way out. He wanted to take the money Sarah and I had saved dollar by dollar, shift by shift, and give it to a bookie. And he was doing it behind his wife's back, the same wife he had chosen over me. I took the paper from his hand. Damon let out a sigh of relief. "Thank you, Dad. Thank you. Look, once I cash this, I will give you $500. You can get a better room. Maybe get some food. $500. He was offering me $500 of my own money. He was offering me a crumb from the loaf I had baked. I looked down at the document. It required the signature of the primary beneficiary. Me. "You are afraid of her, aren't you?" I asked softly. Damon wiped sweat from his forehead. "You do not know what she is like, Dad. She is relentless. If she knows I messed up, she will destroy me." "She already destroyed you, Damon," I said. "You just haven't realized it yet." I thought about the urn. I thought about the way Sarah used to look at Damon when he was a baby. She used to say he had sensitive eyes. She used to say he would be a gentleman. She was right. He was gentle, too gentle. He was soft clay in the hands of a sculptor who liked to break things. But I was not soft clay. I was iron. "You stood there," I said, my voice rising. "You stood there in the driveway while she mocked me. You stood there while the police put me in a car. You stood there while she threw your mother into a trash can meant for dog waste." Damon flinched. "Dad, please. I told you she is stressed. It is not her fault." "It is never her fault, is it?" I asked. "And now you want me to fund your lies? You want me to bail you out so you can keep pretending to be a millionaire? I just need a signature," he pleaded. "Why do you have to make everything a lecture? Just sign the damn paper." I looked at the paper one last time. Then I ripped it in half. The sound of the tearing paper was loud in the small room. Damon's eyes went wide. "Dad, what are you doing?" I put the two halves together and ripped them again and again, until the document was nothing but confetti in my hands. I opened my hand and let the pieces fall to the dirty carpet. "You are crazy," Damon shouted. "You are a crazy old man. That was $40,000. That was my life." No, I said. That was your mother's life. That was her sweat. That was her sacrifice. And I will burn it before I let you throw it away on a poker game. Damon fell to his knees, frantically trying to gather the pieces as if he could tape them back together, as if he could tape his integrity back together. You have to sign another one, he stammered. We can print another one. Get up, I ordered. He looked up at me on his knees in a cheap motel room, clutching scraps of paper. He looked pathetic. I said, get up, I roared. He scrambled to his feet, backing away toward the door. You are selfish, he spat at me. You always were. You think you are so righteous. You are just a bitter old man who cannot stand to see his son succeed. Succeed? I laughed. A dry, humorless sound. You call this success? You are begging your homeless father for money to pay off a bookie while your wife drives a car she cannot afford. You are not a success, Damon. You are a warning label. I walked to the door and opened it wide. Get out, I said. Damon fixed his coat, trying to regain some shred of composure. Fine, he said. Stay here and rot. When the money comes in, do not come crawling to me. Do not ask for a penny. You are dead to me. I looked him in the eye. I looked deep, searching for the boy I once knew. He was gone. I do not have a son named Damon, I said. My son died the moment he let his wife throw his mother away. You are just a stranger who owes me nothing and to whom I owe nothing. Damon's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The finality of my words hit him. He realized, perhaps for the first time, that I was not just angry, I was done. He turned and walked out into the cold. He walked fast, almost running, fleeing from the truth I had just handed him. I slammed the door shut. I locked the chain. I locked the deadbolt. I leaned my forehead against the wood and closed my eyes. My chest hurt. My heart felt like it was cracking open. Disowning your child is not a victory. It is an amputation. It is cutting off a limb to save the body. It hurts. God, it hurts. But as I stood there listening to his footsteps fade away, I felt something else too. I felt lighter. For 35 years, I had carried him. I had carried his tuition, his mistakes, his excuses. I had carried the weight of trying to make him a good man. I put the weight down. I turned back to the room. I picked up my shoe polish. I had a meeting in an hour. I had to meet Saul. I had to meet Tiffany. I was not a father anymore. I was a trustee, and the time for mercy had passed. I finished polishing my shoes until they shone like mirrors. I put on my tie. I looked in the cracked bathroom mirror. Thaddeus King looked back at me. He looked tired. He looked old, but his eyes were clear. It is showtime, I whispered to the reflection. I grabbed my cane and the folder Saul had given me. I stepped out of the motel room, leaving the torn pieces of the insurance policy on the floor. I did not look back. The storm was over. The judgment was about to begin. The house I built with overtime pay and missed holidays was vibrating. I could hear the bass of the music from the end of the block. It was a deep, rhythmic thumping that felt like a headache waiting to happen. I parked my truck around the corner out of sight. I did not want to give Tiffany the satisfaction of seeing my rust bucket next to the rows of Mercedes and BMWs lining the driveway. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I was wearing my charcoal gray suit. It was 20 years old. The lapels were a little too wide for current fashion, and the fabric was worn thin at the elbows, but it was clean. It was the suit I wore to church. It was the suit I wore to negotiate the steelworkers' strike of '98. And it was the suit I wore to bury Sarah. It was my armor. I stepped out into the cold night air. I did not limp. I forced my back straight, ignoring the fire in my knee. Tonight I was not a homeless old man. Tonight I was the messenger of consequence. I walked up the driveway. The house was lit up like a casino. Purple and gold lights washed over the brick facade. There were valet attendants running back and forth, parking cars that cost more than I had earned in a decade. At the front door, a man the size of a vending machine stood guard. He was wearing a black suit and an earpiece. He saw me coming and crossed his enormous arms. His eyes scanned my old suit, my scuffed shoes, and my cane. He made a judgment in less than a second. "Help you with something, Pops?" he asked, stepping in front of the door. "Deliveries are around back." I stopped. I looked him up and down. "I am not a delivery man," I said. "I am here for the party." He laughed. A short, dismissive snort. "Yeah, sure you are. Look, this is a private event, invitation only, and I do not see your name on the list." I reached into my pocket. The guard tensed his hand, moving toward his belt. He thought I was reaching for a weapon. In a way, I was. I pulled out a small cream-colored business card. It was not mine. It was Saul's. But on the back, Saul had written a direct number, a number for the head of the private security firm that this guard worked for. Saul Berkowitz represented the security firm in a lawsuit 3 years ago. He saved them millions. I held the card up. "Call this number," I said. "Tell Mr. O'Malley that Thaddeus King is at the door. Tell him that if I am not inside in 30 seconds, the union contract for your entire company comes up for review on Monday." The guard frowned. He took the card. He looked at the name. His eyes widened slightly. He looked at me again, reevaluating the old man in the cheap suit. He tapped his earpiece. "Base check, a reference for me." He waited. 10 seconds passed. The music from inside was pounding against the door. The guard's face went pale. He straightened up. He handed the card back to me with 2 hands like it was a holy relic. "I apologize, Mr. King," he said, stepping aside and opening the heavy oak door. "Please, go right in." I nodded. I did not smile. Power does not need to smile. I walked inside. The heat hit me first. Then the smell of expensive perfume and truffles. The foyer where I used to leave my muddy boots after a shift was transformed. There were waiters with silver trays weaving through a crowd of people I did not recognize. These were not friends. These were sharks. They were the hangers on the social climbers, the people who smell money like blood in the water. I walked through the crowd. People turned to look. The chatter died down as I passed. I was a stain on their perfect picture, a reminder of reality in their fantasy world. I saw the ice sculpture first. It was in the center of the living room. It was a giant swan dripping melting water into a basin of shrimp. It was tacky. It was excessive. It was Tiffany. And there she was. She was standing on the second step of the grand staircase holding a champagne flute. She was wearing a gold sequined dress that shimmered under the chandelier. She looked like a trophy. She was laughing at something a man in a tuxedo was saying. Then she saw me. Her smile vanished. Her glass lowered. The room went silent. The DJ must have sensed the tension because even the music faded down. Tiffany stared at me. Her face went through a spectrum of emotions: shock, confusion, and then pure, unadulterated rage. "What are you doing here?" she screeched. Her voice cracked, ruining her elegant facade. I stood at the bottom of the stairs. I leaned on my cane, looking up at her. "Hello, Tiffany," I said. My voice was calm, carrying through the silent room. "Lovely party. Who is paying for it?" She stomped down 1 step. "Security!" she yelled. "Where is security? Who let this beggar in?" The crowd parted as she pointed a manicured finger at me. "Get him out!" she screamed. "He is trespassing. He is a homeless man. Get him out before he steals the silverware." I did not move. I did not look at the guests who were whispering behind their hands. I kept my eyes locked on hers. "I am not here to steal Tiffany," I said. "I am here to deliver something." I reached into my inside jacket pocket. Damon stepped out from the shadows of the dining room. He was holding a glass of whiskey. He looked drunk. He looked like he had been crying, but the alcohol had washed away the guilt, leaving only a dull resentment. "Dad, go away," he slurred. "Just go away. You are embarrassing us." I ignored him. I pulled out a blue envelope. It was a formal legal notice, a cease and desist order regarding the dissipation of estate assets. I walked up 2 steps. Tiffany backed away, clutching her pearls. "Stay away from me," she hissed. I held the envelope out. "You are served," I said. She slapped the envelope out of my hand. It fluttered to the floor, landing on the polished hardwood. "I do not care about your papers," she yelled. "I am rich. Do you hear me? I am worth $50 million. I can buy and sell you 10 times over." I looked at the envelope on the floor. "You are spending money that is currently in probate, Tiffany," I said. "You are taking out loans against an inheritance that has not been distributed. That is fraud. And this document serves as formal notice that any further spending will be used as evidence of fiscal irresponsibility." She threw her head back and laughed. It was a manic, high-pitched sound. "Irresponsibility. Who are you to judge me? You are a loser, Thaddeus. You lived in my house. You ate my food. And now you come here in your suit from the Goodwill trying to scare me." She turned to the crowd, spreading her arms wide. "Look at him," she announced. "This is my father-in-law, the man who tried to poison my husband against me. The man who is so jealous of our success that he tries to ruin our celebration." A few people chuckled nervously. Most just stared. Tiffany looked back at me, her eyes gleaming with malice. Trenchup, dispute. Dispute with who? Thaddeus, with the ghost of my father. Or with you. You are a nobody. You have no standing. My lawyer said you signed your rights away. You are nothing. I took a step closer. The smell of expensive champagne on her breath was overpowering. You are right, I said softly. I signed my rights to this house away, but I did not sign away the truth. I pointed to the ice sculpture. That ice is melting, Tiffany, just like your time. Get out, she screamed, her face turning red. Get out, or I will call the cops again, and this time I will tell them you attacked me. She looked around for the security guard. He was standing by the door, arms crossed, looking at the ceiling. He was not moving. Why aren't you doing anything? She shrieked at him. I pay you. Throw him out. The guard looked at her, then at me. He gave me a barely perceptible nod. He is not causing a disturbance, ma'am, the guard said. He is just talking. Tiffany looked like she was going to explode. She grabbed a glass from a passing waiter's tray and threw it. It shattered against the wall near my head. Shards of glass rained down on my shoulder. I brushed a piece of crystal off my lapel. I am leaving, I said. I turned my back on her. I walked down the steps. Damon blocked my path. He swayed slightly. You ruined it, he whispered. You always ruin everything. Why couldn't you just stay away? I looked at my son, really looked at him, the whiskey stains on his shirt, the fear in his eyes. I did not come to ruin it, Damon, I said. I came to save you. But I see now that you do not want to be saved. You want to drown. I walked around him. As I reached the door, Tiffany yelled one last thing. Go back to your truck, old man. Freeze to death. No one will miss you. I stopped at the threshold. I turned around. The whole room was watching. Enjoy the champagne, everyone, I said, my voice projecting to the back of the room. Drink it while it is cold, because tomorrow the bill comes due, and I promise you none of you can afford it. I walked out into the night. The door closed behind me, muting the sound of Tiffany's screaming. I walked down the driveway past the Bentleys and the Porsches. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. I had looked the devil in the eye, and I had not blinked. I got into my truck. I did not turn it on immediately. I sat there in the dark, listening to the silence. I pulled out my phone. I had one text message. From Saul. It is done, the text read. The emergency hearing is set for 10 a.m. The judge signed the order. The accounts will be frozen at midnight. I looked at the clock on the dashboard. It was 11:30. Tiffany had 30 minutes left of being rich. I started the engine. I was not going back to the motel. I had work to do. I had to prepare my testimony. I had to prepare to become the executioner of her dreams. As I drove away, I saw a firework explode over the house. A burst of gold and red against the black sky. It was fitting. A bright, loud explosion that fades into nothing but smoke and ash. That was Tiffany King. And I was the wind that was about to blow the ash away. The office of Saul Berkowitz was a museum of the 1980s. It smelled of stale cigar smoke, old leather, and dust. The only modern thing in the room was the laptop Saul was currently hunched over his thick glasses, reflecting the blue light of a spreadsheet. It was 2 a.m. We had not slept since the party. Adrenaline is a powerful fuel, but rage is even better. I sat in the corner nursing a cup of coffee that tasted like battery acid. My leg was throbbing from the cold and the long hours of standing, but I did not complain. We were hunting. Saul grunted and spun his chair around. He looked like a bulldog who had just found a bone. Thaddeus, he said, tapping the screen. Look at this. I levered myself up with my cane and walked over. I looked at the bank records Saul had legally obtained through his position as the executor's attorney. What am I looking at? I asked. Saul pointed to a series of recurring payments. $5,000 a week, to a company called Iron Temple Fitness. That is a lot of gym memberships, I said dryly. Saul shook his head. It is not a membership. It is a private contractor fee. For a personal trainer named Jackson Miller. I frowned. Tiffany likes to look good. She is vain. This is not surprising. Saul clicked a few keys. Thaddeus, look at the timestamps. These payments are not for training sessions. They are made at midnight, 2 a.m. And look at the notes attached to the transfers. Consultation fees. Wellness checks. Saul looked up at me. Since when do personal trainers do wellness checks at 2 a.m. on a Saturday? I looked at the screen. The numbers were staggering. She was bleeding the household accounts dry to pay this man. She is keeping him, I said, the realization settling in my stomach like a cold stone. She is paying him to be there. And Damon, Saul asked, Damon is paying for it, I said. It is a joint account. My son is paying for his wife's lover to visit her while he sleeps in the next room. I felt a fresh wave of anger, not the hot explosive kind I felt at the party. This was colder. This was the kind of anger that makes your hands steady and your vision clear. I need to see it, I said. Thaddeus Saul warned. You do not need to do this. We have the financial records. That is enough to prove fiscal irresponsibility. It is not enough, I said, grabbing my coat. Financials are just numbers. A judge can dismiss numbers. A judge cannot dismiss a photograph. I walked out of the office. I knew where to find them. Tiffany had posted on her social media an hour ago. A selfie in her car. Caption, late night drive to clear my head. New car, new life. She was not driving to clear her head. I drove my battered Ford truck to the one place in town that stayed open late for the kind of clientele Tiffany desperately wanted to impress. The Velvet Rope Lounge. It was a club downtown, the kind with a VIP section that cost more than my annual pension. I parked down the street in the shadows of a construction site. I waited. 20 minutes later I saw it, the silver Bentley. It gleamed under the streetlights, a $200,000 symbol of her arrogance. It was parked in the alleyway behind the club, away from the paparazzi, away from prying eyes, but not away from mine. I watched as the driver's door opened. Tiffany stepped out. She was wearing a short dress, shivering in the cold, but she was smiling. She leaned against the car, checking her phone. A moment later, the back door of the club opened. A man walked out. He was young, maybe 25. He had the kind of muscles that come from steroids and vanity, not from lifting steel beams or carrying bricks. He was wearing a tight t-shirt despite the freezing temperature. This was Jackson. Tiffany threw her arms around him. They kissed. It was not a quick peck. It was hungry. It was desperate. Then they got into the back seat of the Bentley. I sat in my truck, my hands gripping the steering wheel. I felt a profound sadness for Damon. He was weak, yes. He was a coward, yes. But he loved her. He worshipped the ground she walked on. And while he was at home, likely drowning his sorrows in cheap whiskey, she was here in the car, bought with the promise of his inheritance, betraying him with a boy who was on her payroll. I could have driven away. I could have told myself it was none of my business. But I had a job to do. I was the trustee, and a trustee protects the estate from parasites. I opened my truck door quietly. I moved through the shadows. My cane made no sound on the snow-covered pavement. I had learned how to walk silently in the jungles of Vietnam, and those skills never leave you. I approached the Bentley. The windows were tinted, but the interior light was on. They were arrogant. They thought they were untouchable. I raised my phone. My old Nokia had a camera. It was not high definition, but it was clear enough. I aimed the lens through the rear window. Click. The flash was automatic. I had forgotten to turn it off. A burst of light illuminated the interior of the car. I saw their faces. Tiffany's eyes wide with terror. Jackson's face twisted in confusion. I did not run. I did not hide. I stood there for a second, letting them see me, letting Tiffany see the face of the man she had thrown in the garbage. Then I turned and walked back to my truck. I heard the car door fly open behind me. "Hey, you!" the muscle boy shouted. "Give me that phone, I did not stop." I reached my truck, climbed in, and locked the door just as he reached the handle. He pounded on the glass, his face red with steroid-induced rage. "Open the door, old man. I will break your face." I started the engine. I looked at him through the glass. I pointed to the dash cam I had installed years ago. It was recording everything. He saw the red light of the camera and backed off, cursing. I drove away. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Tiffany. "Dad, please. It is not what it looks like. Do not show Damon. It will kill him. We can make a deal. I will give you the guest house back." I ignored it. I looked at the photo on my screen. It was ugly. It was sordid. A normal father would take this to his son. A normal father would use it to open his son's eyes. But I knew Damon. If I showed him this now, he would collapse. He would cry. He would confront her and she would lie. She would say it was a mistake. She would say she was lonely. She would manipulate him, use his low self-esteem against him. She would convince him to forgive her, and the cycle would continue. No. To save the addict, you have to cut off the supply. Tiffany's power over Damon was not love. It was money. It was the lifestyle she promised him. She was the golden ticket, and he was terrified of losing the prize. So I had to destroy the prize. I pulled over under a streetlight a few blocks away. I opened my contact list. I did not select Damon. I selected a number Saul had given me earlier. Mr. Russo, the private lender. Mr. Russo was a hard money lender. He was the one who had approved the bridge loan for the Bentley and the down payment on the yacht. He had approved it based on two things: the Henderson inheritance and Tiffany's stable family image. Lenders like Russo hate risk. They hate volatility. And nothing screams risk like a pending divorce and a misappropriation of collateral. I typed a message. Mr. Russo, this is a concerned party regarding the Henderson collateral. The Bentley you financed is currently being used for activities that violate the morality clause of the estate. The driver is not the husband. A divorce filing is imminent. The assets are about to be frozen by the probate court. If you want your car back, I suggest you pick it up before it becomes evidence in a custody battle. I attached the photo. I pressed send. I sat back in the seat and exhaled. It was a cold move. Some might say it was cruel, but cruelty is letting a cancer grow because you are afraid of the surgery. I was the surgeon, and I had just cut the main artery of her deception. I imagined the phone ringing in Mr. Russo's office. I imagined the gears turning. These men do not wait for court orders. They have repo men on speed dial. Tiffany thought she was driving home in a luxury car. She was about to find out that she was driving a stolen vehicle. I put the truck in gear. The night was far from over. I drove toward my new destination, not the motel. I had one more stop to make before the sun came up. I had to visit the only person in this world who would understand what I was doing. I drove to the cemetery. The gates were locked, but I knew a way in through the broken fence at the back. I parked the truck and walked through the snow, my cane sinking deep with every step. I found Sarah's headstone. It was simple. Granite. Beloved wife and mother. I brushed the snow off the top of the stone. I did it, Sarah. I whispered to the cold stone. I pulled the trigger. Damon is going to hate me. He is going to hate me for a long time. The wind howled through the trees, answering me. But I promised you, I said, my voice breaking for the first time that night. I promised I would look after him. And looking after him means destroying the thing that is killing him. I stood there for a long time in the dark with the ghosts of my past. Then my phone buzzed again. It was not Tiffany. It was not Saul. It was an automated notification from the credit monitoring service Saul had set up for the estate. Alert: repossession order filed. Vehicle 2024 Bentley Continental. Status: immediate recovery. I smiled. A small, grim smile. Mr. Russo moved fast. Tiffany was probably still in the car with Jackson, maybe trying to come up with a lie to tell Damon. She had no idea that a tow truck was already dispatching to her GPS location. I turned away from the grave. Sleep well, Sarah, I said. I will handle the rest. I walked back to my truck. The sun would be up in a few hours. The meeting was at noon. By the time Tiffany walked into that lawyer's office, she would not just be a woman who lost her father-in-law. She would be a woman walking without wheels, without money, and without a place to hide. The trap was set. Now all I had to do was wait for the snap. The sound of a credit card being declined is embarrassing, but the sound of a multi-million-dollar bridge loan being denied is a death sentence. I did not need to be in the room to know what happened at the First National Bank of Chicago that morning. Saul told me everything. He said the loan officer took one look at the repossession order for the Bentley and the flagged credit report from the jewelry store and closed the folder. He told Tiffany that until the probate was finalized, she was considered a high-risk borrower. High risk. That is banker talk for radioactive. I sat in my truck outside the Plasma Donation Center on the south side. It was a long way from the manicured lawns of the North Shore. This was the part of town where desperation lived. The building was gray concrete, and the line of people waiting outside wrapped around the block. They were people trying to make rent, people trying to buy groceries, people trying to keep the lights on for one more week. And standing in that line wearing a wrinkled cashmere coat that was worth more than every car in the parking lot combined was my son. Damon looked like a ghost. His skin was pale and clammy. He was shifting his weight from foot to foot, trying to avoid making eye contact with the man in front of him who was smoking a cigarette. I watched through my windshield, my heart heavy with a mixture of pity and disgust. Tiffany had sent him here. Saul had intercepted the text messages. Tiffany was in a panic. The caterers for the yacht party were demanding a deposit. The florist was threatening to sue. She needed $5,000 cash by noon to keep the charade going. She could not sell the furniture because it was technically part of the estate inventory. She could not sell the jewelry because she had already pawned the pieces Richard gave her years ago, so she decided to sell pieces of her husband, go to the blood bank she had texted him. They pay extra for the first time. Then go to the payday lender on 55th Street. Max out your personal line. We just need to hold on for 48 hours, Damon. Do not be useless. Do not be useless. That was her mantra. If you were not feeding her ego or her wallet, you were useless. I watched Damon shuffle forward. He went inside the building. I waited. I waited for 45 minutes. When he came out, he had a small bandage on the inside of his elbow and a prepaid debit card in his hand. He looked dizzy. He leaned against the brick wall for a moment, closing his eyes. He had sold his own plasma to pay for a party that was celebrating money he would never see. I started the engine of my truck. I did not honk. I just pulled up to the curb where he was standing. I rolled down the passenger window. "Get in," I said. Damon jumped. He looked at me with wild, terrified eyes. He tried to hide the bandage on his arm, pulling his sleeve down. "Dad," he stammered. "What are you doing here? Are you following me?" "Get in," I repeated. "Before you pass out on the sidewalk." He hesitated, looking up and down the street as if Tiffany might be watching from a drone. Then the cold and the dizziness won. He opened the door and climbed in. The truck smelled of old coffee and gasoline, a smell that used to comfort him when he was a boy. Now he wrinkled his nose. "I am just running errands," he lied. His voice was thin. I looked at the bandage. "Is that what we call it now?" I asked. "Errands. How much did they give you, Damon?" $50. 100. He looked away, staring out the window at the bleak street. "It is temporary, Dad. Everything is temporary. The lawyers are just working out a snag. Once the funds are released—" "There are no funds, Damon," I interrupted him. He whipped his head around, anger flaring in his eyes. "Stop saying that. You are just jealous. You want us to fail." "I am not jealous," I said calmly. "I am realistic. And right now, reality is that your wife has you selling your own blood to pay for flowers." "It is not for flowers," he shouted. It is for an investment." I laughed. A dry, harsh sound. "An investment. Is that what she told you? Damon, wake up. You are drowning. You are visiting payday lenders. Do you know what the interest rate is on those loans? 300%. You are digging a hole so deep you will never see the sun again." He slumped in the seat. The fight drained out of him as quickly as it had appeared. He covered his face with his hands. "I do not have a choice, Dad," he whispered. She is spiraling. If I do not come back with the money, she screams. She throws things. She says, I am not a man. She says if I loved her, I would find a way." "That is not love, Damon," I said softly. "That is hostage-taking." He looked at me, tears welling in his eyes. "Help me, Dad. Please. You have friends. You have connections in the union. Can you loan me $5,000? Just $5,000. I will pay you back double next week. I swear on Mom's grave." I gripped the steering wheel. Hearing him swear on Sarah's grave was like a knife in my gut. He had already dishonored her memory by letting Tiffany toss her urn. Now he was using her name to feed the beast. "I cannot help you," I said. "You mean you won't?" he accused. "You have money buried somewhere. I know you do. You always saved. You are just punishing me." "I am not punishing you," I said. "I am refusing to pay the ransom. If I give you money, you will just give it to her, and she will burn it, and tomorrow she will want 10,000 and then 20. Damon began to weep. It was a pathetic, broken sound. "I am scared, Dad. I am so scared. I think she is going to leave me if the money does not come through. And if she leaves me, I have nothing. I have no job. I have no house. I have no credit." I looked at my son. He was right. He was about to be stripped bare. But he needed to be stripped bare. He needed to hit the bottom. You cannot build a foundation on quicksand. You have to dig down to the bedrock. I reached into my glove compartment. Damon's eyes lit up. He thought I was reaching for a checkbook. I pulled out a small travel-sized bottle of orange juice and a granola bar. I kept them for my blood sugar. "Here," I said. "Drink this. You look like you are going to faint." Damon stared at the juice bottle. The disappointment on his face was crushing. "Juice?" he asked. "That is your help. It is what you need," I said. "Your blood sugar is low. Your judgment is clouded." He slapped the bottle out of my hand. It bounced off the dashboard and rolled onto the floor mat. Keep your damn juice, he screamed. I need real help. I need money. He grabbed the door handle and shoved the door open. He stumbled out onto the curb, almost falling into a pile of dirty snow. He turned back to look at me, his face twisted with hate. I hate you, he spat. I hope you die alone in this truck. I watched him. I did not get angry. I felt a deep, abiding sorrow. Damon. I called out. He stopped, but he did not turn around. Go home, I said, and tell your wife something for me. He waited, his shoulders shaking. Tell her to read the will again, I said. Tell her to read Section 7, Clause 4. Damon turned his head slightly. What's Section 7, Clause 4? I repeated. Tell her to read it carefully, and tell her that the definition of solvency is about to become the most important lesson of her life. What does that mean? He asked. It means, I said, shifting the truck into drive, that the clock has run out. I pulled away from the curb. I watched him in the rearview mirror. He was standing there, a small, lonely figure in a big coat, clutching a debit card bought with his own life force. Section 7, Clause 4 of the Henderson will stated, the beneficiary must maintain a state of personal financial solvency and must not be engaged in predatory borrowing or high-risk debt accumulation. Any evidence of financial distress or mismanagement prior to the distribution of assets shall be grounds for immediate disqualification. By sending Damon to a payday lender, by maxing out her credit cards, by having her car repossessed. Tiffany had not just been reckless. She had violated the core condition of the trust. She had disqualified herself, and she did not even know it yet. I drove toward downtown. The meeting with the lawyers was set for noon. I had a few hours left. I needed to stop by the dry cleaners to pick up my best tie. I was not just going to a meeting. I was going to a funeral. The funeral of Tiffany King's ambitions. As I drove, I thought about Damon's face. I thought about the fear in his eyes. He would hate me after today. He would hate me when the truth came out. He would hate me when he realized that I was the one holding the axe. But one day, maybe years from now, when he was standing on his own 2 feet, earning his own money, living a life of truth, maybe then he would understand. Sometimes a father has to let his son fall so he can learn how to stand up. I turned on the radio. A jazz station was playing Miles Davis. So, what? The trumpet notes floated through the cab, melancholic and strong. So what, indeed? I tapped my fingers on the steering wheel. I was ready. The king was coming for his castle. The clock on the wall of the dry cleaner ticking was the only sound in the room. I stood there watching the steam rise from the press as the old woman ironed my best tie. It was a silk tie, deep burgundy, the color of dried blood. Sarah had bought it for me for our 30th anniversary. She said it made me look like a statesman. Today, I needed to look like a judge. While I waited, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Saul. He had bugged the conference room at his office where Tiffany and her lawyer were currently reviewing the unredacted will before our noon meeting. Saul was a lawyer who operated in the gray areas, and today I was grateful for every shade of gray. He sent me an audio file. I put the phone to my ear. Through the static, I heard the sound of pages turning frantically. I heard the sharp intake of breath that sounds like a drowning swimmer gasping for air. Then I heard Tiffany's voice. It was shrill, panicked, stripping away all the polish she usually presented to the world. "What is this?" she screamed. "What is Section 7? Why didn't you tell me about this?" I closed my eyes and listened. I could imagine her perfectly. The sweat ruining her expensive makeup, the trembling hands clutching the paper that was about to strangle her. Her lawyer, a slick man named Pembroke who charged $500 an hour to help rich people hide their sins, sounded nervous. "Mrs. King, please calm down," Pembroke stammered. "This is a standard morality clause. It is a bit more specific than usual, but we can navigate it." "Navigate it!" Tiffany yelled. "Read it! Read it out loud!" I listened as Pembroke read the words that Richard Henderson had written on his deathbed, the words that I now knew by heart. The beneficiary must demonstrate a lifestyle of ethical standing devoid of scandalous behavior, excessive debt, or public disgrace. Furthermore, the beneficiary must maintain harmonious and supportive family relationships for a probationary period of 6 months following my death. The evaluation of these standards is at the sole and absolute discretion of the trustee. The silence on the recording was heavy. "Harmonious family relationships," Tiffany whispered. Her voice was trembling with a mix of fear and fury. I kicked the old man out, she hissed. I kicked him out into a snowstorm. I threw his wife's ashes in the garbage, and I am cheating on his son with a personal trainer. She let out a short, hysterical laugh. I am 0 for 3. Pembroke, I am failing every single condition. I signaled the dry cleaner lady that I was ready. She handed me the tie wrapped in plastic. I paid her with the last of the cash from my wallet. It left me with exactly $2. I walked out to my truck and sat inside, continuing to listen to the recording. Pembroke tried to soothe her. Look, Tiffany, these clauses are subjective. Harmonious is a vague term. We can argue that Thaddeus was toxic. We can argue that he threatened you. We can spin the narrative. Spin the narrative, I muttered to myself. That is all they knew how to do. Twist the truth until it looked like a lie and polish a lie until it shone like gold. But then Tiffany's voice changed. The panic receded, replaced by the arrogance that was her defining trait. Wait a minute, she said. The trustee. It says here the trustee has sole discretion. Yes, Pembroke agreed. That means the trustee is the judge, jury, and executioner. Well, who is it? Tiffany demanded. Who is this mysterious person holding my $50 million? It is redacted until noon, Pembroke said. But usually in cases like this, it is an old family friend, a colleague, someone Richard trusted with his life. Tiffany laughed. It was a cold, calculating sound. Dad didn't have friends. She scoffed. He only had employees. It is probably Arthur. Or maybe that senile accountant, Mr. Miller. She paused, and I could practically hear the gears turning in her head. It is just a person, Pembroke, she said, her voice dripping with confidence. And people have needs. People have prices. Tiffany, be careful, Pembroke warned. Bribery is a felony. Oh, shut up, she snapped. It is not bribery. It is a consulting fee. It is a gift. Whoever this trustee is, they are not a saint. Everyone wants a piece of the pie. I will just offer them $1 million to sign off on the paperwork. Who would say no to $1 million just to say, I am a good daughter, I took the earbud out of my ear? $1 million. She thought she could buy her way out of a moral test. She thought $1 million could wash away the stain of throwing a mother's ashes into the trash. She thought money was the universal language. She did not know Richard Henderson. And she certainly did not know me. I started the truck and drove toward downtown. As I navigated the icy streets, my mind drifted back to 1980. Tiffany thought her father was just a checkbook. She did not know the man who built the empire. She did not know about the riots. It was a hot summer in Chicago. The steelworkers were on strike. Tensions were high. The company had hired scabs, and the union was furious. I was a young negotiator, then full of fire and righteousness. Richard Henderson was the new owner of the mill, a man everyone called the Butcher because of how he cut costs. The riot started on a Tuesday. A brick was thrown, a window shattered, and suddenly the picket line turned into a war zone. Police on horses, tear gas canisters arcing through the air like fireworks, men screaming, fighting with pipes and bats. I was in the middle of it, trying to get my men to pull back, trying to stop the violence. And then I saw him. Richard Henderson had come down to the line personally. He was foolish, or maybe just brave. He was wearing a suit, standing by his car, trying to talk to the mob. They surrounded him, 5 men with tire irons. They were not seeing a human being. They were seeing the enemy who was starving their children. They were going to kill him. I saw it in their eyes. I could have walked away. I could have let it happen. He was the opposition. He was the man trying to break my union. But I looked at him and I saw a man who was standing his ground. I saw fear, yes, but I didn't see cowardice. I ran into the circle. I did not have a weapon. I just had my voice and my size. I stood between Richard and the mob. I took a blow to the shoulder from a lead pipe that was meant for his head. I grabbed the leader of the group, a man I had known for years, and I shoved him back. Not like this, I roared at them. We are men, not animals. We fight with contracts, not with murder. I took 3 more hits that day. I dragged Richard Henderson into the safety of the guard shack while the world burned around us. We sat there for 2 hours, breathing in tear gas, him in his torn Italian suit, me in my bloody work clothes. He looked at me, wiping blood from his lip, and asked, "Why? Why did you save me? I am trying to destroy you." I looked at him and said, "Because if I let them kill you, we become what you think we are. And I am not a thug, Mr. Henderson. I am a man of my word." That was the day the respect started. We never agreed on much. We fought over wages, over benefits, over pensions. But we never lied to each other. And we never crossed the line of honor. Years later, when he was dying, he called me. He told me about Tiffany. He told me about his fears. Thaddeus, he had whispered, gripping my hand with frail fingers. You are the only man who ever saved my life without asking for a reward. You are the only man who understands that money is nothing without a code. I need you to do one last thing for me. I need you to save my daughter, not from poverty but from herself. I promised him. And now Tiffany King was planning to offer me $1 million to betray that promise. I pulled into the parking garage of Saul's building. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I straightened the burgundy tie. I grabbed the folder. I grabbed the urn from the passenger seat. Sarah was coming with me. I walked into the building, my cane clicking on the marble floor. I took the elevator to the penthouse suite. The receptionist looked at my old suit and frowned. Can I help you, sir? Deliveries are in the basement. I am not a delivery man, I said for the second time in 24 hours. I am Thaddeus King. I am here for the Henderson reading. Her eyes went wide. She checked her list. Oh, I am so sorry, Mr. King. They are waiting for you in the conference room. I walked down the long hallway. I could hear voices arguing inside. I stopped at the heavy mahogany door. I took a deep breath. Tiffany thought the trustee was a senile old man she could manipulate. She thought she was walking into a business transaction. She was walking into a judgment day. I opened the door. The room went silent. Tiffany was sitting at the head of the table, looking manic and disheveled. Damon was next to her, looking at the floor. Pembroke, the lawyer, looked up with a polite, condescending smile that froze when he saw me. What is he doing here? Tiffany shrieked, jumping up. I told you security was supposed to keep him out. Saul Berkowitz, sitting at the other end of the table, smiled. It was the smile of a wolf who just saw the sheep walk into the den. Sit down, Mrs. King, Saul said calmly. No, I will not sit down, Tiffany yelled, pointing at me. This is a private legal proceeding. This homeless bum has no business here. Get him out. Pembroke, do something. Pembroke stood up, adjusting his glasses. Mr. King, I am afraid my client is correct. This is a closed meeting for the beneficiary and the trustee only. I must ask you to leave. I did not say a word. I walked into the room. I walked past Damon, who shrank away from me as if I were made of fire. I walked past Tiffany, who was vibrating with rage. I walked to the head of the table opposite Tiffany. There was a leather chair there, the chair reserved for the trustee. I pulled it out. The sound of the chair scraping against the floor echoed in the silent room. I sat down. I placed my cane on the table. Then I placed the blue urn next to it. Tiffany stared at me. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her brain was trying to process what her eyes were seeing, but the reality was too impossible to accept. You, she stammered, you are sitting in the wrong chair. That is the trustee's chair. I looked at her. I looked at Pembroke. I looked at Damon. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out the unredacted will. I tossed it onto the center of the table. Hello, Tiffany, I said. My voice was not the voice of a father-in-law. It was not the voice of a victim. It was the voice of the man who stood between a mob and a tycoon in 1980. We have a lot to talk about, specifically Section 7. Tiffany's face went white, a deathly chalky white. She looked at Pembroke. Pembroke snatched the will and flipped to the last page. He read the name. He dropped the paper. He looked at Tiffany with pure horror. It is him, Pembroke whispered. Tiffany collapsed into her chair. I leaned forward, clasping my hands together. You mentioned $1 million, Tiffany, I said, my voice ice cold. You said everyone has a price. I pointed to the urn. You threw my price in the garbage yesterday. Now let us discuss your future, or rather, the lack of it. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor of the Berkowitz and Associates building was silent, but it was a silence that screamed. I was already inside the conference room, sitting at the head of the heavy mahogany table, watching the security feed on a tablet Saul had set up for me. I watched them standing in the metal box as it ascended. Tiffany was checking her reflection in the brass doors, aggressively applying a fresh coat of red lipstick as if she were painting war paint on a soldier before battle. Damon stood in the corner, pressing his forehead against the cool metal wall, looking like a man marching to the gallows. And Pembroke, their expensive lawyer, was wiping sweat from his upper lip, checking his watch every 10 seconds. They looked like what they were, guilty people hoping for a miracle. Tiffany smoothed her dress. It was black modest, the kind of dress a grieving daughter wears for the cameras. But I knew she had returned the tag inside so she could return it tomorrow. She turned to Damon and slapped his arm hard. "Stand up straight," she hissed, her voice tinny through the tablet speakers. "You look like a funeral mute. We are walking in there to collect $50 million. Act like a winner." Damon didn't straighten up. He just closed his eyes tight. I put the tablet down. I adjusted my tie. I placed my hands on the leather folder in front of me. To my right sat Saul, grinning like a Cheshire cat. To my left, the blue urn of my wife, Sarah. She had a front row seat for this. The heavy double doors of the conference room swung open. Tiffany walked in first, leading with her chin. She put on a sad, brave smile, ready to charm whoever was sitting in the big chair. "Good afternoon, gentlemen," she began, her voice dripping with fake honey. "I apologize for the delay. We had some—" Her voice died in her throat. The smile slid off her face like oil off water. She stopped so abruptly that Pembroke bumped into her back. She stared at me. For a solid 10 seconds, the only sound in the room was the hum of the air conditioning. She blinked once, twice, expecting the image to change. She expected to see a distinguished white banker or perhaps a gray-haired corporate attorney. She did not expect to see the black man she had kicked out into a blizzard 18 hours ago. "You," she whispered. Then the shock turned to indignation. Her face flushed a deep, ugly red. "What is he doing here?" she shrieked, spinning around to face Saul. "Mr. Berkowitz, I demand an explanation. Why is the help sitting at the table?" Saul did not look up from his papers. He just pointed his pen toward me. Pembroke stepped forward, trying to regain control. "Mr. Berkowitz, this is highly irregular. We are here to meet the trustee of the Richard Henderson estate. We are not here to have a family therapy session with Mrs. King's estranged father-in-law. Please ask him to vacate the seat." I did not move. I did not speak. I just watched them. I watched the realization try to claw its way into their brains, but their prejudice was blocking the door. To them, I was Thaddeus the retired laborer, Thaddeus the cripple, Thaddeus the moocher. They literally could not conceive of a world where I held power over them. Tiffany marched up to the table. She slammed her designer bag down right next to Sarah's urn. "Get out of that chair, Thaddeus," she spat. "You are embarrassing yourself. Did you break in here? Did you follow us? I am calling the police. Again. And this time I am pressing charges for stalking." She reached for the phone on the conference table. That is when I spoke. "Sit down, Tiffany." My voice was not loud. It was the deep, resonant baritone that I used to use when I walked onto a factory floor to stop a wildcat strike. It was a voice that vibrated in the wood of the table. She froze her hand, hovering over the receiver. "I am not going to ask you again," I said. "Sit down. Or I will adjourn this meeting and you can explain to your creditors why the probate remains frozen for another 6 months." Tiffany's eyes went wide. She looked at Pembroke. Pembroke looked at Saul. Saul gave a slow, confirming nod. Pembroke's face went pale. He grabbed Tiffany's arm and practically forced her into a chair. "Mrs. King, please," he whispered urgently. "Sit down." Tiffany sat, but she was trembling with rage. Damon slumped into the chair next to her, burying his face in his hands. He knew. He had figured it out the moment he saw the look in my eye. Pembroke cleared his throat. "Mr. Berkowitz, are we to understand that Mr. King is the appointed trustee?" Saul slid a document across the table. It was the unredacted deed of trust, signed by Richard Henderson in bold blue ink. "See for yourself," Saul said. Pembroke picked it up. His eyes scanned the document. He read the clause. He read the name. He slumped back in his chair, defeated. "It is valid," he murmured. "Thaddeus King is the sole executor and trustee of the Spendthrift Trust." Tiffany snatched the paper from his hands. She stared at it, her eyes darting back and forth. "No," she gasped. "No. This is a mistake. My father hated him." She looked at me, her eyes wild. "He hated you. You were enemies. You fought the Union Wars in the 80s. He called you a communist. He called you a stubborn mule. Why would he give you his money?" I leaned forward. The leather of the chair creaked. "He did not give me his money, Tiffany," I corrected her. "He gave me the job of protecting it." I looked at the portrait of Richard Henderson hanging on the wall of Saul's office. "Your father and I were enemies." "Yes," I said. "We fought for 10 years. I fought him for wages. He fought me for profits. But in all those years, do you know what we never did? We never lied to each other. I turned my gaze back to her. You do not know the story, do you? You were too busy spending his money at boarding school to ask him about his life. I told her about the riot of 1980. I told her about the day I dragged her father out of a burning car when the strikers tipped it over. I told her about the nights we sat in dive bars drinking cheap whiskey, arguing about politics until the sun came up. He knew who I was, I said. He knew I was a man who could not be bought. He knew I lived by a code. And when he got sick, when he realized that the cancer was eating him alive, he looked at his life, he looked at his empire, and he looked at his daughter. Tiffany flinched. He told me he was afraid. I continued softly. He was not afraid of dying. He was afraid of what his money would do to you. He called you a shark with no teeth. He said you had the appetite of a predator, but the skills of a parasite. You are lying, she screamed, tears streaming down her face. He loved me. He loved you enough to put you in a cage, I said. I opened the folder in front of me. He created this trust because he knew that if he gave you $50 million, you would be dead or destitute in 5 years. He wanted someone to watch over you. Someone who would not be impressed by your tantrums. Someone who would not be swayed by your tears. I paused, letting the silence stretch. He asked me to be the gatekeeper. He asked me to apply the same toughness to his daughter that I applied to his company. Tiffany stared at me, her mouth open, her face a mask of horror. So I said, tapping the folder, "Here we are. The wolf is at the door, Tiffany, and the only person who can let you in is the man you called a piece of trash." Pembroke tried to intervene. "Mr. King, while this is a fascinating backstory, we are here to discuss the disbursement schedule. My client has pressing financial obligations. We would like to request an immediate release of $200,000 to cover expenses." I laughed. It was a cold, short sound. "Expenses?" I asked. "You mean the Bentley, or the yacht deposit? Or perhaps the $5,000 a week she pays her personal trainer to sleep with her?" The room went dead silent. Damon's head snapped up. He looked at me, then at Tiffany. What? Damon whispered. Tiffany's face drained of blood. She looked like a corpse. That is irrelevant," Pembroke stammered, though he looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. "This is about the will. It is entirely relevant," I said, "because the will has conditions." I picked up the document and read from it, my voice echoing in the room. "The beneficiary must demonstrate a lifestyle of moral rectitude." I threw a stack of photos onto the table. The photos of Tiffany and Jackson in the car, the photos of the repo man taking the Bentley, the photos of Damon walking into the blood bank. "Rectitude," I asked. "Is it rectitude to cheat on your husband? Is it rectitude to force your husband to sell his own blood to pay for your vanity?" Damon stood up slowly. He reached for the photos. His hands were shaking so hard the paper rattled. He looked at the picture of Tiffany kissing Jackson. "Tiffany," he choked out. Tiffany did not look at him. She was staring at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. "You old bastard," she hissed. "You spied on me." "I protected the asset," I replied coldly. "And Damon is an asset of this family, even if you treat him like a liability." I turned to Pembroke. "Counselor," I said. "As trustee, I have made my determination regarding the initial disbursement." Pembroke braced himself. "And that determination is?" "Denied," I said. "Denied," Tiffany screamed. "You cannot deny it. It is my money. It is the trust's money," I corrected. "And under the terms of the moral clause, you have failed to meet the standard. You are insolvent. You are adulterous. And you are abusive to the family members the will commands you to respect." I stood up. I loomed over the table. "Tiffany, yesterday you told me I had 30 minutes to get out of your house. I checked my watch. It is now 12:15. The bank has been notified of your breach of contract. The bridge loans you took out are now in default because the collateral, this inheritance, is no longer guaranteed." I leaned in close. "You do not have 30 minutes, Tiffany. You have nothing. The house is in Damon's name, but the mortgage payments came from the allowance Richard gave you. That allowance stops today. The repo trucks are likely at your driveway right now for the rest of the cars. You cannot do this," she wailed, grabbing Pembroke's lapels. "Do something, sue him?" "I cannot sue him," Pembroke said, pulling away from her. "He is following the letter of the will. Richard Henderson gave him absolute discretion. He could burn the money in the parking lot, and it would be legal. Tiffany looked around the room, frantic. Her eyes landed on Damon. "Damon," she yelled, "do something. He is your father. Tell him to stop." Damon looked up from the photos. His eyes were dead. He looked at the woman he had worshipped for 5 years. He looked at the evidence of her betrayal. Then he looked at me. There was no love in his eyes yet, but there was respect. The respect of a man who realizes he has been saved from a burning building even if the fireman had to break his arm to drag him out. Damon looked at Tiffany and said the first honest words of his marriage. "My father is not the one who destroyed us, Tiffany. You are." Tiffany gasped. She looked at me, her eyes narrowing into slits. "You think you have won," she hissed. "You are just a bitter old man. You will die soon, and then I will get it all." I picked up my cane. I picked up Sarah's urn. I adjusted my cufflink. "Tiffany," I said, walking toward the door, "I am 72 years old. I take my vitamins. I walk 3 miles a day, and I have a new reason to live." I stopped at the door and looked back at her. "I am going to live a very long time, just to make sure you learn how to work for a living." I opened the door. "Meeting adjourned," I said, and I walked out, leaving them in the ruins of their expectations. The air in the hallway tasted sweet. It tasted like justice. The conference room was air-conditioned to a sterile 68 degrees, but Tiffany was sweating like she was in a sauna. She sat frozen in her chair, her eyes darting between the unredacted will and my face. She looked like a trapped animal, vicious and terrified all at once. Pembroke, her lawyer, had stopped trying to intervene. He had realized 10 minutes ago that he wasn't sitting in a negotiation. He was sitting in an execution chamber, and I was the one holding the axe. I opened the leather folder in front of me. The sound of the papers rustling was loud in the silence. I did not rush. A good negotiator knows that silence is a weapon. You let the other side drown in their own anxiety before you throw them an anchor made of lead. "We are going to review the conditions of the trust," I said, my voice calm and steady. Item by item. I pulled out the first document. It was the crumpled coffee-stained eviction notice she had forced me to sign the night before. I smoothed it out on the mahogany table. "Exhibit A," I announced. "The family clause." Tiffany flinched. That was a misunderstanding," she stammered. We were going to find you a better place. A place more suitable for your needs." I looked at her over the rim of my reading glasses. "Suitable for my needs," I asked. "A snowbank. Because that is where you sent me, Tiffany. You gave a 72-year-old man 30 minutes to vacate the home he paid for in the middle of a blizzard. You called the police to remove me like a criminal." I turned to Pembroke. "Counselor, does the will not state that the beneficiary must demonstrate filial piety and care for elder family members?" Pembroke loosened his tie. He looked at the floor. It does, Mr. King. And is throwing a disabled veteran out into negative 10-degree weather considered care?" I asked. Pembroke did not answer. He could not answer. Tiffany slammed her hand on the table. "Stop it. Stop twisting things. I was stressed. I was grieving. You cannot judge my entire life based on one bad night." "One bad night," I repeated. "Let's see if it was just one night." I pulled out the second piece of evidence, the photos. The glossy, high-resolution prints of Tiffany and Jackson in the back of the Bentley. I fanned them out on the table like a winning hand of poker. "Exhibit B," I said. "The morality clause." Damon made a sound that was half gasp, half sob. He reached out and touched one of the photos with a trembling finger. In the picture, Tiffany's head was thrown back in ecstasy, her hands tangled in Jackson's hair. It was undeniable. It was raw. Tiffany lunged for the photos, trying to sweep them off the table. "That is private," she shrieked. "You have no right. That is illegal surveillance." "It is due diligence," I said, catching her wrist with a grip that was surprisingly strong for an old man. "The trust demands that the beneficiary maintains a monogamous and honorable marital union." I released her hand. She fell back into her chair, rubbing her wrist. "Who is he?" Damon whispered. His voice was broken. Tiffany turned to him, her eyes pleading. "Damon, baby, listen to me." It meant nothing. He is just a trainer. He was comforting me. I was vulnerable. You were so distant." Damon stood up. His chair fell over backward with a crash. "Comforting you?" he yelled, in the back of a car. While I was at home crying over your father, he looked at me. Dad, did you know I looked at my son? I saw the pain in his eyes, but I also saw the truth finally breaking through the fog of his denial. I found out last night, Damon, I said softly. I did not tell you because I wanted you to see who she really is. I wanted you to see that the woman you are selling your soul for is selling her body to a gym rat on your dime. Damon turned away, walking to the window. He could not look at her. Tiffany turned her fury on me. You ruined my marriage. You did this. You set me up. You set yourself up, I said coldly. You chose to cheat. You chose to lie. I just turned on the lights. I pulled out the third document, the bank records, the payday loan applications, the receipt from the plasma donation center with Damon's name on it. Exhibit C, I said. The financial solvency clause. I pushed the plasma receipt toward Pembroke. Read that, counselor, I ordered. Pembroke picked it up. His eyebrows shot up. It is a receipt for plasma donation, he muttered. $40. I pointed at Tiffany. You are inheriting $50 million, I said, and yet you forced your husband to sell his own blood to pay for flowers. You took out predatory loans at 300% interest. You have liens on every asset you possess. I leaned forward. The will states that the beneficiary must be financially responsible and free of gambling or high-risk debt. Tiffany, you are not just in debt, you are drowning. You are a financial black hole. Tiffany was shaking now. Her arrogance was gone, replaced by pure panic. She realized that the walls were closing in. She realized that I wasn't just scolding her, I was building a cage. So what she cried, tears streaming down her face. So I made mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. I can fix it. Give me the money, Thaddeus, please. I will pay off the debts. I will fire Jackson. I will buy you a new house. Just give me the money. She looked at me with those wide, wet eyes that had manipulated my son for years. She thought she could charm me. She thought she could bargain. I looked at the urn sitting next to me. I thought about Sarah. I thought about the dignity she carried until her last breath. She never begged. She never lied. I closed the folder. The snap of the leather cover was final. It sounded like a gunshot in the small room. I sat back in the chair. I looked at Richard Henderson's portrait on the wall. I gave him a small nod. I have made my decision, I announced. The room held its breath. Pembroke stopped writing. Damon turned from the window. Tiffany stopped crying and leaned forward, hope flaring in her eyes. As the sole trustee of the Richard Henderson estate, I said, my voice formal and heavy, I have evaluated the beneficiary against the standards set forth in the last will and testament. I paused. Tiffany King, you have failed the family clause by abusing your elder. You have failed the morality clause by committing adultery. You have failed the solvency clause by engaging in reckless debt. Therefore, I declare you unfit. The word hung in the air. Unfit. No, Tiffany whispered. You cannot do that. You cannot take it all. I can, I said. And I have. I pulled out a prepared document. Saul had drafted it that morning. According to Section 9, subsection B, in the event that the primary beneficiary is declared unfit, the trustee is empowered to redirect the entirety of the estate to the secondary beneficiary designated by Mr. Henderson. Secondary beneficiary. Tiffany gasped. Who? Damon, is it? Damon? She looked at Damon, her mind already calculating how to manipulate him again, how to get the money through him. I shook my head. No, Tiffany, it is not Damon. Richard knew that if he left the money to Damon, you would just take it from him. He wanted to make sure you never touched a dime. I turned the document around so she could read it. The secondary beneficiary is the Chicago Stray Animal Rescue and Rehabilitation Fund. Tiffany stared at the paper. Her eyes bulged. What she choked out. Animals? Pembroke asked, stunned. He left $50 million to cats and dogs. He loved his dogs, I said, a small smile touching my lips. He always said they were more loyal than people, and considering how you treated his memory and how you treated me, I think it is fitting. You treated people like animals, Tiffany, so now the animals get the life you wanted. I signed the document. The pen scratched loudly on the paper. The transfer is immediate, I said. $50 million. Gone. It will build a new shelter. It will pay for veterinary care for thousands of strays. It will do more good in one day than you have done in your entire life." Tiffany screamed. It was a primal, animalistic sound. She lunged across the table, clawing at me. "You stole my money, you thief! It is mine! It is mine!" Damon caught her. He grabbed her around the waist and pulled her back. She fought him, kicking and scratching, screaming obscenities that would make a sailor blush. "Let me go. He is stealing our future." "He is not stealing it," Damon yelled, shaking her. "He is giving it away. It is gone. Tiffany, it is gone." Tiffany collapsed onto the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. She beat her fists against the carpet. The facade of the elegant socialite was gone. All that was left was a spoiled child throwing a tantrum. I stood up. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a checkbook. The checkbook for the estate. I wrote out one final check. I walked around the table to where Tiffany was lying. I crouched down, my knee popping painfully, but I ignored it. I held the check out to her. "Here," I said. She looked up, mascara running down her cheeks. She snatched the check, thinking maybe I had changed my mind. Maybe it was $1 million. Maybe it was $5 million. She looked at the amount. $100. "What is this?" she whispered. "The will states that if the beneficiary is disqualified, they shall receive a symbolic stipend to prevent them from contesting the will on the grounds that they were forgotten," I explained. I stood up and looked down at her. "Richard didn't forget you, Tiffany. He remembered exactly who you are." I pointed to the door. "This meeting is over. You have your inheritance. Don't spend it all in one place." Tiffany stared at the check. Her hands were shaking. She looked at the $100. Then she looked at the $50 million contract lying on the table, signed over to a dog shelter. The realization broke her. She didn't scream anymore. She just stared at the floor, catatonic. I looked at Damon. He was standing over her, looking at the woman he had married. He looked tired. He looked sad. But for the first time in years, he looked free. "Come on, Dad," he said quietly. "Let's go." I picked up my cane. I picked up Sarah's urn. I walked to the door. I looked back one last time at the conference room. It was a scene of devastation. But it was a necessary devastation. Sometimes you have to burn the field to kill the weeds. I walked out into the hallway. I felt lighter than I had in years. The burden of the secret was gone. The promise to Richard was kept. And justice, cold hard justice, had been served. The silence in the conference room was shattered by a sound that I will never forget. It was the sound of a human being devolving into a beast. Tiffany looked at the check for $100. She looked at the deed of trust transferring $50 million to a shelter for stray dogs. And then something inside her broke. It was not a mental breakdown. It was a morality breakdown. The mask she had worn for years, the mask of the sophisticated, wealthy socialite, disintegrated, revealing the feral creature underneath. She did not cry. She did not beg. She launched herself across the mahogany table, her fingers hooked into claws, aiming for my face. Her eyes were rolled back, showing the whites, and a guttural scream tore from her throat. It was a primal, ugly noise. "You thief! You dirty old thief! I will kill you!" I did not move. I did not flinch. I sat in the leather chair, my hands folded over my cane, watching her fly toward me. I had faced down rioters with lead pipes in the 80s. I had faced down foremen with shotguns. A spoiled woman in a designer dress was not going to make me blink. Before she could reach me, a heavy arm wrapped around her waist. It was the security guard Saul had stationed in the room. He was a professional. He didn't hurt her, but he stopped her momentum cold, lifting her off her feet as she flailed and kicked. Her expensive heels scraped against the polished wood of the table, leaving deep, ugly scratches. "Let me go!" she shrieked, spitting saliva. "He stole my money. That is my money." She thrashed in the guard's grip, turning her rage toward anyone within reach. She kicked Pembroke, her own lawyer, in the shin. Pembroke yelped and scrambled backward, clutching his leg, his glasses sliding down his nose. "Mrs. King, please, cease this behavior immediately," Pembroke yelled, terrified. "You are making it worse." "Worse," she screamed, her voice cracking. "How can it get worse? He gave $50 million to a cat shelter. He ruined me." The guard dragged her back from the table, depositing her in her chair, but he kept a hand on her shoulder, ready to restrain her again. Her chest was heaving. Her hair was a bird's nest. The carefully applied lipstick was smeared across her cheek. I looked at her calmly. You ruined yourself, Tiffany, I said. I just signed the paperwork. Then the sound of technology took over the room. It started with Pembroke's phone, a sharp, insistent ping, then another, then a flood of notifications that sounded like a slot machine paying out a jackpot. But this was the opposite of a jackpot. Pembroke pulled his phone out. His face, already pale, turned the color of ash. "Oh, God," he whispered. "What?" Tiffany snapped, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. "What? Now. The judgment has been filed electronically," Pembroke said, his voice trembling. "Mr. Berkowitz moves fast. The probate court has officially updated the status of the estate to insolvency due to moral clause violation." So what? Tiffany spat. "We appeal. We sue." Pembroke shook his head rapidly. "You do not understand, Mrs. King. The system is automated. When the estate status changed, it triggered alerts to all major credit bureaus and lenders associated with your Social Security number." He held up the phone. "The bridge loan providers just called in the debt. The hard money lenders are demanding immediate repayment of the principal." Tiffany froze. The bridge loans. The millions she had borrowed against the inheritance to pay for the yacht, the parties, the lifestyle. "Tell them to wait," she yelled. "Tell them it is a clerical error." "I cannot," Pembroke said. "They have the court order, and—" "Oh no." He looked at a new email. "The mortgage lender for the house," he said softly. "What about the house?" Tiffany whispered. The defiance was leaking out of her, replaced by a cold dread. "You used the preliminary inheritance letter to secure a second mortgage on the mansion last week," Pembroke said, "to pay for the Bentley down payment. The terms stated that if the inheritance was voided, the loan is in immediate default." He looked up at her. "They are initiating an accelerated foreclosure. They are sealing the property." "Sealing?" she asked. "You have 24 hours to vacate," Pembroke said. "The locks will be changed tomorrow at noon." The room went silent. 24 hours. Yesterday she had given me 30 minutes. She had thrown me into the snow with nothing. Now the universe was returning the favor with interest. Tiffany sat there breathing hard. She looked around the room looking for a lifeline. She looked at Saul, who was busy packing up his briefcase. She looked at me, the immovable object. And then her eyes landed on Damon. Damon was standing by the window staring out at the Chicago skyline. He had not moved during her attack. He had not moved when the financial news broke. He was a statue of misery. Tiffany's fear turned back into rage. She needed someone to blame. She needed someone to fix it. And in her world, Damon existed to serve her. "Damon," she screamed. He flinched but did not turn around. "Are you going to just stand there?" she yelled, standing up again. "Your father just stole our lives. He just made us homeless. Do something." She marched over to him and grabbed his shoulder, spinning him around. "You are useless," she spat in his face. "I married you because I thought you had a backbone. I thought you were a man. But you are just a weak, pathetic little boy who lets his daddy bully us." Damon looked at her. His eyes were red-rimmed and hollow. "Fix this," she commanded, shaking him. "Call your contacts. Sell your kidney. I do not care what you do, but get me my money back." Damon looked down at her hands gripping his jacket, the hands of the woman he had loved since college, the hands he had put a diamond ring on. Then his gaze drifted past her shoulder. It landed on the conference table. The chaos of the last 10 minutes had scattered the papers. The check for $100 was on the floor. The deed of trust was askew. But the photos were right there. I had fanned them out earlier, and in the scuffle they had spread further. There was one photo on top. It was high resolution. It showed the interior of the Bentley. The leather seats were illuminated by the flash of my camera. In the photo, Tiffany's face was clear. Her eyes were closed. Her lips were parted. And Jackson's hand was clearly visible on her thigh, his distinctive tattoo, a tribal band plain to see. Damon stared at the photo. For 5 years he had ignored the signs, the late nights, the constant texting, the way she pulled away when he tried to touch her. He had blinded himself with love. He had told himself she was just stressed, she was just high maintenance. But a photograph does not lie. A photograph does not make excuses. "Damon, are you listening to me?" Tiffany screeched, slapping his chest. "I am talking to you. We are losing the house." Damon gently reached up and removed her hands from his jacket. He walked past her. He walked to the table. He picked up the photo. He held it up to the light. He looked at it for a long time. It was as if he was memorizing the details of his own humiliation. Tiffany turned around. She saw what he was holding. For the first time, she looked genuinely afraid. Not afraid of losing money, afraid of losing her punching bag. "Damon," she started, her voice dropping to a whimper. That is out of context." "Context," Damon whispered. He turned to face her. He held the photo out. "Is this the context?" he asked. "Is this what you were doing while I was at the blood bank?" Tiffany took a step back. "Baby, please. I was lonely. I was scared. It was just physical. It didn't mean anything." It meant everything Damon said. His voice was not loud. It was terrifyingly quiet. "I sold my blood for you," he said. "I humiliated myself for you. I disowned my own father for you." He looked at me. His eyes were filled with shame, deep and burning. "I kicked him out into the snow because you told me we needed space," he continued. "But you didn't want space. You wanted space for him." He pointed to the tattoo in the photo. "Jackson," he said. "The guy I pay $5,000 a week to train you." Tiffany tried to rally. She tried to find the anger again. "So what?" she yelled. "So I slept with him. You were boring, Damon. You were depressing. You were always whining about money. I needed a man." Damon nodded slowly. "You needed a man," he repeated. He looked down at the photo one last time. Then he crumpled it in his fist. "Well, now you have neither," he said. He dropped the crumpled ball of paper at her feet. "I am done, Tiffany." Tiffany stared at him. She laughed nervously. "Done. You cannot be done. You have nowhere to go. You have no money. You need me." Damon looked at her with a clarity I had not seen in him since he was a child. "I would rather sleep in a gutter than spend another night in that house with you," he said. He turned to me. He did not ask for forgiveness. He knew he hadn't earned it yet. He did not ask for money. He knew he didn't deserve it. He just looked at me man to man. "You were right, Dad," he said. "She is a black hole." Damon turned and walked toward the door. Tiffany screamed, "Come back here. You cannot leave me. Who is going to pack the boxes? Who is going to drive me?" "My car is gone." Damon stopped at the door. He didn't look back. "Call Jackson," he said. "Maybe he will give you a ride for $5,000. He walked out. The heavy door closed with a click. Tiffany stood alone in the middle of the room. She looked at the closed door. She looked at the empty table. She looked at me. Her world had not just cracked, it had shattered. She sank to her knees, surrounded by the ruins of her greed. The only thing she had left was a check for $100 and a memory of a life she had thrown away with both hands. I stood up. My knee hurt, but I felt strong. I picked up the urn. "Come on, Sarah," I whispered. "We have a shelter to build." I walked past Tiffany. I did not look down. I left her to the silence of the room, a silence that was finally perfectly deafening. The sound of Tiffany's sobbing was the only thing filling the hallway, but it wasn't the sound of regret. It was the sound of a spoiled child who had dropped her ice cream cone. She was on her knees, clawing at the hem of Damon's pants, begging him to fix the unfixable. "Damon," she wailed, her mascara running in black rivers down her face. "You have to talk to him. He is your father. He cannot do this to us. We are the kings. We are special." Damon stood there looking down at the woman he had worshipped for 5 years. He looked at the top of her head, at the expensive highlights he had paid for, at the diamond earrings he had gone into debt to buy. For the first time in his life, the fog of infatuation cleared, and he saw her not as a prize, but as a parasite. He reached down not to comfort her, but to peel her fingers off his leg. "Get up," he said. His voice was flat, unrecognizable. Tiffany looked up, blinking. "What I said, get up," Damon repeated louder this time. "You look pathetic." Tiffany scrambled to her feet, wiping her nose. "Don't you dare talk to me like that. I am the victim here. Your father set me up and you let him." She poked him in the chest with a manicured nail. "You are weak, Damon. You are a weak, spineless little boy. That is why I needed Jackson, because he is a real man, because he knows how to take what he wants." The air in the hallway seemed to freeze. Damon's hand trembled. All the years of insults, all the years of silence, all the times he had swallowed his pride to keep her happy had all boiled over in a split second. He didn't slap her. That would have been too easy. Instead, he grabbed the designer handbag she was clutching, the Birkin bag that cost more than my old truck, and he hurled it against the wall. It hit the plaster with a deafening thud, spilling lipstick, credit cards, and pills everywhere. "Shut up," Damon roared. The sound tore from his throat like a wounded animal. "Shut your mouth!" Tiffany froze her eyes wide with shock. She had never seen him raise his voice. She had never seen him throw anything. "You want to talk about real men?" Damon screamed, stepping into her space. "A real man doesn't sell his blood to buy you flowers. A real man doesn't let his wife throw his mother's ashes in the trash." He was crying now, angry, hot tears of shame. "I gave you everything, Tiffany. I gave you my dignity. I gave you my father, and you laughed at me in the back of a Bentley with a gym rat." Tiffany took a step back, hitting the wall. "Damon, calm down. You are making a scene. I am making a scene." He laughed hysterically. "You made my life a scene. You made my life a joke." He pointed a shaking finger at the elevator. "Get out." Tiffany stared at him. "What? I said get out," Damon bellowed. "Get out of my sight. I don't want to see you. I don't want to hear your voice. Go find Jackson. Go find another idiot to bleed dry. But you are done with me." Tiffany looked at him, searching for the weakness she had exploited for so long. She didn't find it. She only found the reflection of her own cruelty. "Fine," she spat, adjusting her dress. "I don't need you. You are broke anyway. You are nothing without me." She stepped over her spilled purse, not even bothering to pick it up. She walked to the elevator, pressing the button repeatedly. "I will find a lawyer," she hissed over her shoulder. "I will sue you for everything you have." "You can have the debt," Damon yelled after her. "Take the debt. It is the only thing we have left." The elevator doors opened. Tiffany stepped inside. As the doors closed, she didn't look back. She was already checking her phone, probably looking for the next victim. Damon stood in the hallway, panting. He stared at the closed doors. He was shaking from head to toe. I stood by the conference room door, leaning on my cane. I had watched the whole thing. It was ugly. It was violent. But it was necessary. The fever had finally broken. Damon turned slowly to face me. He looked like a man who had just survived a car crash. He wiped his face with his sleeve, smearing the tears and sweat. He looked at the floor, at the spilled contents of Tiffany's purse. Then he looked at me. He took a few steps toward me. His walk was unsteady. "Dad," he whispered. I didn't move. I waited. "Dad, I did it," he said, his voice trembling with a desperate hope. "I told her to leave. I kicked her out. Did you see I stood up to her?" I nodded slowly. I saw Damon. He let out a breathy, nervous laugh. "She is gone, Dad. The witch is dead. It is just us now, just you and me, like old times." He took another step closer, his eyes pleading. "Look, I know I messed up. I know I was blind. But I fixed it right. I cut the cancer out." He gestured vaguely toward the conference room where the trust documents lay signed. "So, we can fix this right?" he asked. "I mean the money. You didn't really give it all to the dogs, did you? That was just a scare tactic to get rid of her." "Right." I stared at him. The coldness in my chest didn't melt. Damon saw my expression and his smile faltered. "Dad, come on. You are the trustee. You control the funds. You can write a new check. You can void the other one." He licked his lips, desperate. I have 40,000 in gambling debt, Dad. The bookies. They are going to break my legs. And now that Tiffany is gone, the mortgage company is going to come for me. I will be on the street." He reached out, trying to touch my arm. Just release a little bit. Maybe 100,000. Just enough to clear the debts and get me an apartment. I will be good, I promise. I will go back to school. I will get a job. Just give me a fresh start, please. I am your son. I looked down at his hand reaching for me. The same hand that had signed the eviction notice yesterday. The same hand that had held the door open while I walked into the snow. I stepped back out of his reach. "Damon," I said, my voice low and heavy. "You still don't get it." "Get what?" he pleaded. "I left her. I chose you." "You didn't choose me," I said. "You chose survival. You didn't leave her because she threw your mother in the trash. You left her because you found out she was sleeping with another man." I gripped my cane tighter. "You watched her abuse me for years, Damon. You watched her treat me like a servant in my own house, and you said nothing. You watched her spit on my dignity, and you handed her a napkin to wipe her mouth. But I changed," he cried. "I just yelled at her." "Yelling doesn't erase the past," I said, "and it certainly doesn't rewrite a legal contract." I pointed to the closed door of the conference room. "The money is gone, Damon. I signed the transfer. It is already electronic. It is in the accounts of the shelter. It is not a trick. It is not a game. It is done." Damon's face went white. "No. No, you couldn't. Not to your own flesh and blood. My flesh and blood, I asked. Where was your flesh and blood yesterday when I was freezing in a truck? Where was your flesh and blood when you asked me to sign away your mother's death benefit to pay a bookie? I am sorry, he screamed, falling to his knees. I am sorry. What more do you want? I want you to be a man, I said, and being a man means paying your own tabs. I looked down at him. He looked so small, so broken. Richard Henderson didn't leave that money to you, I said. He left it to a trust. And the trust has rules. You are collateral damage, Damon. You attached yourself to a sinking ship because you liked the view. Now you have to swim. But I can't swim, he sobbed. I will drown, then learn, I said. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out my wallet. It was thin, empty of cash. But I had one thing. I pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. It was a business card. Not for a lawyer, not for a bank. It was for the Ironworkers Local Union 63. I dropped the card on the floor in front of him. They are hiring apprentices, I said. It pays $20 an hour. It is hard work. It is cold work. It will break your back and callous your hands. Damon looked at the card through his tears. Construction, he whispered in horror. You want me to be a construction worker like you? I looked at him with a mixture of pity and pride in my own history. It is honest money, Damon. It is money you earn with sweat, not with lies. It won't buy you a Bentley, but it will buy you a good night's sleep. I adjusted my hat. I am not giving you a penny from the trust, I said, because if I bail you out now, you will never learn. You will just find another Tiffany. You will just find another shortcut. I turned to walk away. Dad, he screamed, crawling after me. Don't leave me. Please, I am scared. I stopped. I didn't turn around. We are all scared, son, I said. That is why we wake up. I walked to the elevator. I pressed the button. The doors opened. I stepped inside. I watched Damon kneeling in the hallway, surrounded by the wreckage of his wife's purse and his own choices. The doors closed, cutting off his sobbing. I was alone in the elevator. My reflection in the metal doors looked tired. I felt a single tear roll down my cheek. It was a tear for the boy I used to carry on my shoulders. But the boy was gone. And the man who replaced him had to walk his own road now. I had saved him from the shark. Now he had to learn to survive the ocean. Desperation has a specific smell. It smells like sweat mixed with expensive perfume. It smells like fear trying to disguise itself as confidence. I sat in the security office of the First National Bank watching the monitor with the branch manager, Mr. Henderson. No relation to Richard, just a good man who respected the law. On the screen in high definition black and white, I watched Tiffany King walk into the lobby. She was wearing sunglasses indoors. She was wearing a trench coat that was buttoned all the way up, trying to hide the fact that she was wearing the same dress from yesterday. She looked like a woman on the run because that is exactly what she was. She walked up to the teller window. I could see her hands shaking. She was clutching a leather portfolio, the last remnant of her executive cosplay. She forced a smile at the young teller, a girl named Sarah. It stung my heart to see that name tag. My Sarah would never have looked a woman like Tiffany in the eye without seeing the darkness inside her. Mr. Henderson leaned forward and pressed the button for the audio feed. Tiffany's voice came through the speakers, tinny but clear. It was too loud, too high-pitched. The voice of a liar trying to sell the truth. I need to make a withdrawal, Tiffany said, sliding a piece of paper across the marble counter. An emergency withdrawal from the Henderson Trust account. The teller picked up the paper. It was a check for $500,000, and at the bottom in shaky blue ink was a signature, Thaddeus King. I looked at the screen. I looked at the signature she had forged. It was a good attempt. She had clearly practiced. She had probably traced it from the eviction notice I signed the night before. She thought she was clever. She thought an old man's handwriting was just a series of squiggles that anyone could copy. She forgot that a man's signature is his bond. And my signature has a specific pressure point on the K in King, a legacy of the arthritis in my thumb. A detail she missed. But more importantly, she missed the fact that I had flagged the account at 9 a.m. that morning. The teller, Sarah, typed something into her computer. Her eyes widened slightly. A red box had just popped up on her screen. Silent alarm. Do not process. Contact authorities immediately. Sarah was a professional. She didn't flinch. She didn't look at the security camera. She smiled at Tiffany. Of course, Mrs. King, Sarah said. For a withdrawal of this size, I just need to get manager approval. It will only take a moment. Please, have a seat in the waiting area. Tiffany tapped her fingers on the counter. I am in a rush, she snapped. I have a flight to catch. Just override it. I cannot override it, ma'am, Sarah said politely. It is protocol. Tiffany huffed and snatched the check back, holding it like it was a winning lottery ticket. She walked over to the seating area and sat down on the edge of a leather chair. She kept checking her watch. She kept looking at the door. She was waiting for money. I was waiting for justice. Mr. Henderson looked at me. Do you want to go out there, Mr. King? I shook my head. Number. If I go out there, she will run. She will scream. She will cause a scene and try to play the victim. We wait for the professionals. I watched her on the screen. She pulled out her phone. She dialed a number. Jackson, she whispered. Where are you? I am at the bank. I am getting the cash. What do you mean you are busy? You are my trainer. Don't you hang up on me. She pulled the phone away from her ear and stared at it. He had hung up. The rat was abandoning the sinking ship. Tiffany put her head in her hands. She looked small. For a second, just a split second, I felt a twinge of pity. Not for the woman she was, but for the child she must have been before greed ate her soul. But then I remembered the urn in the trash. I remembered Damon's face when he saw the photos. Pity is a luxury I could no longer afford. 3 minutes later, the revolving doors of the bank stopped moving. 2 uniformed officers walked in. They didn't rush. They didn't have their guns drawn. They walked with the heavy, purposeful stride of men who have a job to do. Tiffany didn't see them at first. She was too busy digging through her purse looking for a pill bottle. Mrs. Tiffany King, one of the officers asked. Tiffany jumped. The pill bottle flew out of her hand and skittered across the floor. She looked up. She saw the uniforms. She saw the badges. Yes, she squeaked. Is there a problem? Please stand up, ma'am, the officer said. Tiffany stood up slowly. Her legs were shaking so hard I could see her knees knocking together on the monitor. What is this about? She demanded, trying to summon her old arrogance. Do you know who I am? I am the heir to the Henderson fortune. The officer pulled a pair of handcuffs from his belt. The metallic click was audible even over the speaker. We know who you are, ma'am, the officer said. You are under arrest for attempted grand larceny, forgery, and identity theft. Tiffany's eyes bulged. Forgery, she screamed. That is my money. My father left it to me. That old man stole it. I was just taking what is mine. She pointed at the teller. She lied to me. She said she was getting the manager. The officer grabbed her wrist. He spun her around. You have the right to remain silent, he recited. No. No. Tiffany yelled, struggling. She tried to pull her arms away. She kicked out at the officer's shin. Don't make this harder, the officer warned, pinning her against the wall. He snapped the cuffs on her wrists. Click, click, the sound of finality. The bank lobby had gone silent. Customers were staring. People were holding up their phones, recording the downfall of the socialite. This was the live stream she hadn't planned for. Tiffany was sobbing now, ugly, gasping sobs. Please, it is a mistake. Call Thaddeus. Call my father-in-law. He will explain he knows me. The officer began to lead her toward the door. We can call him from the station, the officer said. Wait, Tiffany screamed. She stopped fighting. She looked up. She looked directly at the black dome of the security camera in the corner of the ceiling. She knew. Somehow in her madness, she knew I was watching. Thaddeus, she wailed, staring into the lens. Dad, please, I know you are watching. I know you are there. She fell to her knees, dragging the officer down with her. I am sorry. I am so sorry. I will do anything. I will sign the papers. I will leave town. Just don't let them take me. I cannot go to jail. I am not built for jail. Tears streamed down her face, ruining her makeup, turning her into a grotesque mask of sorrow. Help me. You promised Richard you would look after me. Is this looking after me? Sending me to prison? I sat in the security office staring at her pixelated face. She was right. I did promise Richard I would look after her, and that is exactly what I was doing. I was looking after her by stopping her. I was looking after her by preventing her from stealing $500,000 and fleeing the country. I was looking after her by giving her the one thing she had never had in her life: consequences. Richard had spent his life shielding her. He paid off her mistakes. He covered up her scandals. He created a monster who thought the rules of gravity didn't apply to her. I was applying gravity. Dad, please, she screamed, her voice breaking. I love you. I always loved you. The lie was so bold, so desperate, it made me nauseous. She loved me. She loved me when she kicked me out. She loved me when she mocked my poverty. Mr. Henderson looked at me. He looked uncomfortable. Do you want to say something to her? He asked. We can patch you into the PA system. I looked at the microphone. I looked at the woman on the floor begging a camera for salvation. There was nothing left to say. Words were useless with Tiffany. She twisted them, used them as weapons. Action was the only language she understood. No, I said. The officers hauled her to her feet. She was dead weight now, limp with despair. They dragged her toward the revolving doors. Thaddeus, Thaddeus. Her screams faded as she was pushed out into the street and into the back of the waiting cruiser. I watched until the car drove away. I watched until the lobby returned to normal, the customers going back to their transactions, the teller wiping a tear from her eye. It was over. She was gone. I reached out and pressed the power button on the monitor. The screen went black. The silence in the small office was heavy. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. I am sorry it came to this, Mr. King. It is a tragedy. I stood up. I picked up my cane. My joints felt stiff. I felt every minute of my 72 years. It is not a tragedy, Mr. Henderson, I said quietly. A tragedy is when something bad happens to a good person. This is just accounting. The bill came due. I walked out of the office. I walked past the teller, Sarah. She looked at me with wide, fearful eyes. I stopped. You did a good job, Sarah, I said. You were brave. She nodded, unable to speak. I walked out of the bank. The sun was shining. It was cold, but the sky was a brilliant, hard blue. I took a deep breath of the freezing air. Tiffany was on her way to a holding cell. She would be processed. She would be fingerprinted. She would trade her designer dress for an orange jumpsuit. For the first time in her life, she would be just a number. And me, I had a job to do. I had $50 million to transfer. I had a construction site to visit to see if a certain apprentice had shown up for work. And I had a dog to adopt. I walked to my truck. I didn't look back at the bank. I didn't look back at the police station. I put the truck in gear. The nightmare was over. Now the work of rebuilding could begin. I turned on the radio. No jazz today. Today I needed silence. The silence of a clean slate. I drove away, leaving the wreckage of the King family in the rearview mirror, ready to build something new from the ashes.